IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. It is Saturday, and that means it's time for the RTCF show. Recruiting, Notre Dame team, and some college football stuff. And Sean, we've been hitting on a lot of, I think, kind of heavy topics this week on both of our shows, and so what we decided to do is today is have a little bit of fun,
Yeah.
and talk a little recruiting. We're going to go when our recruiting conversation is, we're going to kind of make some predictions of what we think is going to happen with the 2023 class when they get to Notre Dame. And then the other one, our team topic today, Sean, is we're going to talk about breakouts, and we're going to talk about guys that we project on offense to kind of break out in various forms, right? Because breakouts can mean different things. And then third topic is going to be college football related, and we're going to talk the top 5 quarterbacks in college football that we are predicting and projecting into 2025, and then just some other guys to keep an eye on. It was sparked by a question we had yesterday in our mailbag, and it was just kind of thrown up at us, and I was like, I really like to think about this one and kind of come back with a conversation, because as you mentioned, like if you look at our top 5 last offseason, it didn't look anything like how it ended. Well, the top 3 was close. Well, 4 of the 5 was close. We had CJ Stroud, we had Bryce Young, we had Hendon Hooker, and we had Caleb Williams. Now, our order was off because Caleb was 5. But we had Devin Leary in the top 10, and he had an off year. We had Brennan Armstrong in the top 10. He had a rough year. We had Michael Penix was nowhere to be found on our list last season, and he had a big breakout. So we had Phil Dracovic in the top 10. He had a rough year with injuries and dealing with other issues. So, but it's still fun to talk about, right? And to look into. And I like the way Sean looked at his list. So we're going to dive into that at the end, Sean. And there something else happened today in college football we didn't get a chance to talk about, and we may talk about that here at some point in time at the end of the show too, Sean. I think you know what I'm referring to, right?
Mm-hmm.
So some head coaching moves at a certain program today that happened. So we might get into that at the end, depending on how much time we have. We may wait till the mailbag if somebody asks about it. But Sean, I want to begin with some recruiting. And we're going to focus on the Notre Dame recruiting efforts, right? And we're going to talk about the incoming class, the class that Notre Dame just signed. And we've had some fun with this, and I know we're both very high on that class and very high on what it brings to the table. So we're going to have a little bit of fun today and go with some predictions that we have for this class, Sean. And this class enters kind of from a big picture standpoint, Sean. First, to begin with, this class enters a unique situation because, in my opinion, this is Notre Dame's best class in over a decade, in my opinion. When you include, there's impact talent in the class. Offensively, you've got Charles Jackasaw, who's an impact lineman. You've got Jeremiah Love, who's an impact runner. You've got, potential impact at receiver with Greathouse, with Braylon James. Rico Flores is a really good player. Caleb Smith is a guy that you and I both won't be shocked if his ends up being a lot better than maybe people think he's going to be.
Yeah.
Defensively, you've got some big-time upside on the D-line, raw, but a lot of upside. Linebacker, Jaden Ausberry and Drake Bowen, Christian Gray, Michael Bell. There's a lot of impact talent. There's depth. They met all their needs. They got, Kenny Minchie at quarterback was kind of that final piece to the puzzle. But it also walks into a situation, Sean, where this is arguably one of the deepest Notre Dame teams they've had in a long time. Now, what is the top-end talent of this Notre Dame team? That remains to be seen. But I think when you look at it, Sean, it's certainly there's a lot of depth there with the exception of safety. Right. And so we'll get into that at some point in time as well. So we're going to have some fun, and we're going to kind of project, what we think this class has a chance to do. And we'll do some freshman year predictions. We'll do some down the road predictions. We're going to have a little bit of fun and somewhat put our money where our mouth is when it comes to making predictions for the 2023 class. So Sean, as the guest on today's RTCF show, I'm going to let you kick things off and kind of get into what you think is the first, and it can be either side of the ball. What is the first thing that you think of when you're talking about, okay, I'm going to make this prediction for the 2023 class?
Well, the 2023 class, in my opinion, is going to make this team better with their ability to push the players in front of them. I think that's something we're going to see starting in spring ball and probably even in these workouts with Matt Balis in the offseason. That's vitally important. We've heard Marcus Freeman speak about the middle of his roster multiple times in the offseason and how important that is. You start with the quarterback room, and I think you guys did a great show this week talking about how the quarterback room has improved. And you're right, it looks totally different, in this January than it did the previous January for Marcus Freeman and his staff. So with all of that said, look at the domino effect. How does that impact workout? How does that impact the other fields on the practice field? When team, when they go to team and they're spread out, you have the youngsters over there, you have what they script out as the starters right here on this field. Well, the starters are going to be working with Sam Hartman. And then the other field is going to be working with Tyler Buckner. And then on the other field, you got Angeli or Kenny Minchie. So the improvement in the quarterback room changes the efficiency of the practices, the way the practices goes. It infuses confidence into your skill position players. It does a lot of different things. And it's greater than just what we're going to end up seeing on Saturdays. The ability to build the middle of that roster, to push the players above them, which I'm not sure last year, a lot of players that were coming back really felt any type of pressure. I don't know if a sense of entitlement crept in some way, form, or fashion. But I think this team in particular is going to have, we know every team, no matter what program you're at, every team has a different vibe to it every year. Even though you're bringing back a lot of people, the people coming in, whether it's via that class and recruiting or the transfer portal, they change things. They change the chemistry. I think the 23 class is going to bring incredible chemistry to Notre Dame just because of the chemistry they had in recruiting and the things we heard from guys like Caleb Smith and Thomas Harper, talking to them and speaking to them about the affinity they have for Notre Dame and how they project national championship hopes onto this roster and to this team from the practices that they were able to watch in bowl preparation. So, with all of that being said, one term that I can use that most of us might be used to or have heard, even if we haven't tasted, gumbo. What's the gumbo going to taste like, right? And the most important thing, most people from down south will tell you, if the roux ain't right, the gumbo ain't right. And we know that roux is that gravy. And if the gravy isn't right, doesn't matter what type of seafoods you put in there or ingredients. It's not going to be right. And I think the greatest thing that this 23 class is bringing in is a great mindset, a great roux for everything else to come in and to operate at its best.
So your prediction is going to, based on that, is going to be what? That this class is going to be the foundation to what?
Well, I've said this, meeting these young men and talking to them the entire time last year, that I just felt like that they have extreme confidence that they're going to be difference makers. We always talk about gap closers, right? There's one thing to be a gap closer physically. And we talked about this last night. Like, what is the step from high school to college? Right? Some people are just physically gifted and can just step onto a field. But even in that, they're going to hit a time in a season where it's going to seem like they've pressed up against an immovable object in their life. Do they have the gumption to keep going? Do they have the resilience to be a person of perseverance? That's something that I think this class already has a mindset. So even during that freshman year, when they hit those times, those tough times with Matt Bayless, when they hit those tough times in spring practice, they're going to be the ones that push through and make an early impact. That's something that we, for a long time as Irish fans, have sat back and we all sit back and say, where's this guy? Well, where's this guy? I think this is a year where the freshman class gets 4 to 5 impact players on the field
There it
at
is.
some point,
Okay.
in some form or some way. Now, there's 3 different areas of football, right? Special teams, offense, defense.
Yeah,
In
because
some
it
way,
could be
form, or
something like
fashion.
Jeremiah Love becoming an impact punt returner or kick returner
Absolutely,
or something like that. Right.
absolutely, absolutely. Because I feel
Right.
like their mindset is we're coming in to make a difference now, and I think they're going to show that toughness and resiliency that's
Very
needed to be
interesting.
able to do that. So, like you mentioned, Jeremiah Love, uh, Greathouse is just a dude. He's just a guy that walks in amongst other great players it feels like he's just as great, and he's going to put in the work
He's going to think
to do it.
that he's their best receiver the minute he gets on campus.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's just
Absolutely.
and honestly, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you, Sean. I don't know if Notre Dame has had enough receivers over the years that have that like
Well, we're going back to like what, Golden Tate,
I mean
maybe
Michael Floyd.
Michael Floyd.
Honestly, I mean even Will Fuller didn't even really. I mean Will Fuller played like it, but he didn't necessarily have that. He was so
Mentality coming
reserved
in.
and quiet, and
Yeah.
that guy that just was like, look, none of y'all. Okay, hey, I love y'all. You're my teammates and all that, but just so y'all know, I'm that dude.
Yeah.
Right. And you don't need that. Georgia didn't have that at receiver. They had it at tight end. Notre Dame has had some of that at tight end. I mean, Michael Mayer was that dude, right? I think Cole Kmet eventually became that dude. Cole Kmet in 2019 was that guy. Cole Kmet in 2018, 2017 was a guy trying to find a role. He's trying to find a niche, you know what I mean? And so Tyler Eifert was that guy. He kind of had that, not in an arrogant way, but just like he played like a dude that just knew there wasn't anybody on the other team that can guard me.
Right.
And Jaden Greathouse has some of that, and I think they need that. And that leads to my first prediction, Sean. And my first prediction is that he is the freshman that's going to have the biggest impact. He's going to come in and catch at least 30 passes. And my other part of this prediction is don't be surprised if he makes noise when it comes to the starting punt returner. Don't be surprised if he's that guy. I mean, look, of all the incoming freshmen and all the dynamic ability, and you've talked a lot about Caleb Smith, and that's another one that wouldn't shock me if Caleb Smith makes some noise there. But who had the most punt returns for touchdowns last year? It was Jaden Greathouse. I mean, that's high school, but the point is he fits kind of the mold of what Notre Dame had at punt returner this year. And I'm just assuming that that's kind of what they want. First and foremost, they want a guy that's rangy, that can field the punt. That's super important. Field the punt is the most important responsibility for a punter. It's not to score, it's to field the punt. That means you've got to have the range to get over to the ball wherever it is. That means you have to have the ability to sometimes catch it off of a hop. So you have to have some hand-eye coordination to make sure, because one thing is you'll see these punt returners, they can catch it good, Sean, when it's kicked in the air. But if that thing hops, they don't know how to play it. They get a little scared. They're like a shortstop who's afraid the ball is going to hit him in the face. You know what I mean? But the great ones are guys that know how to play that angle correctly. They see how the ball is being kicked, and then they can react to it when it's off the ground. And then you've got to have a guy, to me, that's big enough to be physical and take a little punishment based on the modern game. And so I think that Jaden Greathouse, there's punt returns that are very good that aren't that way. But I think for Notre Dame and how they go after it, because they're so aggressive going after punch, you're not getting a lot of protection from your kicking.
Right.
And I want Brian Mason to maintain. I don't want him to be less aggressive to set up returns. Like let your aggressiveness force mistakes by the punter that allow returns, or force your aggressiveness to cause the other team to put more guys in protection, which allows less guys going down the field. And with that in mind, that's what makes me think, because Greathouse got that size to kind of break a tackle, and he's got vision with the ball in his hands. Like that's the part of his game that shocked me the most, Sean, when I first started breaking him down. I was like, he's not your traditional after the catch guy.
No.
But he's good after the catch. And that's something that you need. And remember, when Michael Floyd returned punts in the late in the 2011 season, and he had that long punt return in the Champ Sports Bowl against Florida State, similar thing, broke a tackle early and boom, he was off. And I see Jaden Greathouse being a guy that kind of has the same. He doesn't have Floyd's. Their game has some similarities, some. He's not as big and long as Michael, and probably not as fast, but he has a very similar swagger to Michael Floyd.
Yeah.
And he has a similar kind of build, because Michael was a strong lower body kid. Jaden's a strong lower body kid, Sean. And so to me, my first prediction, and it's a little bit bold, is that Jaden Greathouse will catch at least 30 passes as a true freshman. And don't be shocked if he's the punt returner at some point in time in 2023.
That's interesting that you brought up Brian Mason and you want him to still be aggressive. I think Brian Mason strategically can scare teams into great returns. And what I mean by that is, like, there's so much film that people are going to be watching week to week now. You can give someone a look that looks like a punt block, and you're really setting up a return off the look. And I think that's something Notre Dame is going to take advantage of this year as well.
Sean, The South Carolina had the number 1 ranked special teams in college football last year.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Brian Mason scared them into 2 false starts.
Yes.
Hey,
And
think about that.
delay of games as well.
Delay games. That's what I meant.
Yeah.
Delay games. He
Yeah.
scared them into 2 delay games. The best special teams in the country, the only team that could contend with Notre Dame, and where they were better than Notre Dame, they didn't have quite as many punt blocks as Notre Dame. But where they were better than Notre Dame last year was they were a better return team for the most part than Notre Dame. And so you looked at it and said, this team, and they had a little bit, if I remember correctly, I could be wrong on this, but I thought their kicker was a little bit more accurate than what Notre Dame's was last year. But you look at it, Sean, and it's that team had no reason to be scared of Notre Dame. They were the one team you looked at and said, this could be the kryptonite to Notre Dame, or at least neutralize Notre Dame's special teams. Nope.
No,
Scared them into 2 false starts or 2 delay games.
Yeah.
And that, like you said, that's a thing where he strikes fear in the hearts of opponents. And look, with this 2023 recruiting class and the 2022 class getting a year in the system where guys aren't redshirting anymore, there's no reason not to have Nolan Ziegler on all your special teams this year now.
Right.
There's no reason not to have Jalen Snead on your – I mean, they're going to be even more athletic and more dynamic next year on their coverage and block units than they were this year. Think about that for a second. And so that gets you kind of scared. So to your point, Sean, that's going to result in some line drive kicks that your punt returner is going to step onto, because Brandon Joseph wasn't a very good punt returner. He wasn't a very good punt returner. And he wasn't really a dynamic punt returner. Still finished 11th in the country in punt return average. Why? Because he was getting a lot of balls he was fielding with no one within 20 yards of him because they were too busy protecting the punter, or, the punt would be short or, kind of line drive, and he was able to kind of come up and get it.
Yeah.
And you put a more dynamic athlete back there, and all of a sudden, a couple of those ones where him and Salerno were just a guy away from breaking it, all of a sudden with a guy like a Jaden Greathouse, a Caleb Smith, a Jeremiah Love, a guy like that, all of a sudden that gets broken, and he's off to the races. So I would really like to see one of the freshmen step into that role this season. If Jadarian Price hadn't hurt his Achilles, he'd be someone I'd be talking about, but I just want to see him get healthy first. And if he can get healthy, then have him be more of a kick returner. So Jaden Greathouse is my first prediction for this class. Sean, what's another prediction that you have? And it can be long-term, it can be short-term, because I know you had some really interesting ones. And when we had our superlatives article on Irish Breakdown. So what's another prediction that you have, Sean, that you want to discuss?
Christian Gray is going to force Mike Mickens and his staff to make some interesting decisions at some point during this year, because they're going to have 3 really good long defensive backs. Do you kick him inside? Do you think about kicking Cam inside? Do you put him at nickel and pretty much allow him to take the same path that Jaden Mickey took last year? Jaden Mickey's going to be in the battle, but I think Christian Gray is going to make an impact really early defensively for Notre Dame. I really do. And Notre Dame, I saw an article that a tweet that Ryan responded to, and I think you said something about it as well, when people were talking about the top 5 duos at defensive back.
Guy was like, name me a better duo than Travis Hunter and Cormani McClain. It's like, really? Travis Hunter barely even played corner last year, and Cormani McClain hasn't even stepped foot on a college football campus, and they're only anointing him as the best cornerback duo in the country.
Well, they're looking at the upside of the talent, and not looking at film or really checking out numbers.
Or using common sense.
Yeah. But the combo of Cam Hart and Benjamin Morrison sounds great. But the trio of Cam Hart, Christian Gray, and Benjamin Morrison is going to sound even better. And that's not to be dismissive of Jaden Mickey to say I don't think he's going to be a really good player. I think he's going to be a really good player. I'm just saying that Christian Gray is going to make an impact early.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna double down, and I'm gonna share a little bit of what you put in our superlatives. So one of the things that you put in your superlatives to back up that you felt this way for a while, and this was on signing day in December, is one of your bold predictions was Notre Dame is going to have back-to-back years of first-round draft picks at corner.
Yeah.
Benjamin Morrison after his time is over, and then Christian Gray a year later.
Yep.
And it is kind of interesting to see, like, there's a lot of similarities between those two players. I think I graded out Benjamin higher than Christian.
Mm-hmm.
I loved Benjamin from junior year. I mean, the moment I saw him on. Christian, as you know, Sean, I liked him, but I didn't love him.
Right.
But his senior year was so much more. It was so much more impactful. He just looked more natural at corner. You could see the speed a little bit more and how they played. And I think the competition being upped, and I mean it was insane.
He
You
faced
could then
everybody.
see because there were times okay, is he just not fast or is he just toying with this guy? You know what I mean? And then when he's playing Aaron Scott, when he's playing Cardinal Tate, when he's playing against Ryan Wingo, you're like, okay, yeah, this kid can run.
Yeah.
This kid can run. He jumped, for me, he was a borderline top 150 kid as a junior, Sean. Jumped into a legit top 100 player as a senior, in my opinion. So he certainly saw a jump as a senior. So I really liked kind of where you're at with your head there. I'm going to make another one, Sean, and I think you're going to like this one. Notre Dame will have another freshman All-American this year on offense. They had one 2 years ago with Joe Alt. They had one 3 years ago with Michael Mayer. They're going to have another one in 2023, and it's not going to be Jaden Greathouse. It's going to be Charles Jagasaw. That's my prediction. And it's going to be very similar to what happened with Joe Alt. He won't start day one, but by middle of the year, he's going to jump into the lineup by either because he's just too good or there's an injury or something's going to happen. And he's going to end up being the dude because we've seen Notre Dame has needed someone to replace an injured player every year for the last. I mean, it happened in 2022 because Jarrett Patterson didn't start the opener; he was injured. It happened in 2021 with. You had multiple. Blake Fisher gets hurt in the first half of the first game. Then you had some other injuries. You ended up using like 4 left tackles at some point in time during the year. Yeah. Used 2 left guards during the year. In 2020, Jarrett Patterson got hurt. Then Tommy Kramer got hurt. Then Zeke Correll got hurt. And so you've seen this a lot. 2019, Robert Hainsey, remember, got lost for the season in 2019. Tommy Kramer battled injuries in 2019. And at one point in time, you had Trevor Rulin and Josh Lugg at your right guard, right tackle. And so we've seen this before, right? 2018 another one, 2020 was when Liam Eichenberg got knocked out of the Florida State game for a little bit. You had to bring in Dylan Gibbons. He played really well. And before Liam came back in. So we've seen it, right? So I'm just going with trends. And to me, the guy that I think that Charles Jagasaw is the guy that by the middle of the year is going to be very hard to keep off the field is my prediction.
Well, we've talked about him. And this, of course, a lot of people, when Ryan was down in San Antonio, you heard about him being out with the injury. I talked to him right before his procedure, which was right after the bowl game. He said everything went perfect, feels great. He'll be ready to go springtime. And if he's physically ready to go, he's physically ready to go. That's my double entendre today. If he's physically ready to go, he's physically ready to go. And I don't think it will be middle of the spring. There are going to be some discussions in the coach's room after practice, like, so yeah, I know we really don't want to go ahead and put a freshman out there this early at the top of the rotation, but he's good. It's tough to hold back, and it's tough to keep him from strategically as a coach, because you've been there before in these rooms. Strategically as a coach, when you have a kid that's that good, like what games, and I hate to say games, but that's the only word that I can use right now. But what motivations can you use by not allowing him to kind of like ascend to the number one? Maybe slow it down a little bit, or just don't put it on paper. Continue to let him work. Continue to let him chase.
It'd happen. He would be not a starter until the first game he's going to start.
Okay.
I mean, it would just be like, I'm not hyping him up. I'm not, I'm not doing. I'm putting a lot of push. I'm pushing him in the film room, and I'm pushing him on the field in practice. I'm doing all that.
Yeah.
I'm getting him some work. I'd probably, the days that we have the media there, I probably don't let him get first team reps that day. Because I think sometimes Notre Dame has done I felt like this, the way that they hyped up Jerry Tillery as a redshirt as a freshman, like during spring and fall camp, there was no way he was going to be able to live up to expectations by the time we got to the season. No way. And I don't necessarily want to do that. Start hyping him up once he gets into the lineup, right? And I think that's something that I'd like to see Notre Dame do a little bit better job of, is really pushing their players for some of these All-American awards and things like that.
Right.
Like they should have done more to push Blake Fisher to be an All-American, freshman All-American, the way that they did Joe Alt as an All-American, things like that.
Yeah.
And so to me, I'd like to see a little bit more of that. That's just part, but their staff's also evolving and developing and growing and all that. But that's the thing for me, though, is just get the big thing is just, if the opportunity is there, you let him have it. But he'd have to be like clearly better than the guys in front of him for me to play him. And that's going to be the challenge for that prediction. Is it's not going to be easy for even a guy like Charles Jagasaw to come in and say, okay, Andrew Kristofic, Billy Schrouth, Rocco, Michael Carmody, Ashton Craig, Ty Chan. Sorry, guys, I'm beating you all out. You know what I mean? Is he capable of it? Yeah, and we're having some fun with some bold predictions today. But I'm also at the standpoint of when we talk about sophomore breakouts, which we're going to do on our podcast coming up at some point in time this week, there's a couple guards that are going to be in the conversation for potential sophomore breakouts. So it's not going to be easy. But it may be an injury. It may be something. I mean, it may be a tackle. I mean, who knows? Like if somebody goes down there. But I just have this feeling that at some point in time this year, Charles Jagasaw is going to step into the lineup and be like, okay, that guy's ready to go. That guy's ready to go. You got another one, Sean? So we've talked about Christian Gray.
Just pulling from the superlatives for me, I just fully believe that at some point, Kenny Minchie is going to be the backup quarterback going into a Saturday game.
Okay.
Which means he's going to be able to go into a game and operate Tommy Rees's offense. And the only way that happens is because of injury. But we fully expect at some point injury to happen for one of your quarterbacks in college football. That's just the way it is, right? You don't feel forced to play Sam Hartman if he has a nagging injury, because you feel comfortable starting Tyler Buckner for a game, which means Kenny Minchie's going to be his backup, and he's going to be one play away from coming into a game on a Saturday. And I said this, going into November, he's going to be ready to start a football game. He's not going to be ready to be who he is, but he's going to be competent enough, if you want to use that word, to start a football game at Notre Dame and run a simplified offense. Like if you go look at what they were able to do last year with Drew Pine, I fully expect that Kenny Minchie will be able to do that. A simple game plan, depend on the running game, make some easy throws, do your job. We walk out of here with a win. I think Kenny Minchie is going to show. I think we're going to hear things about Kenny Minchie in practice throughout the year. Like, yo,
this kid's really picked up the offense fast.
Yeah.
Here's one for me. The best blocking tight end by the end of the 2023 season will be Cooper Flanagan. He will be. I have a feeling if Cooper puts in the work this offseason, that he's going to end up playing a lot more than people think. Because Mitchell Evans is a good player. I'm going to talk about Holden Stace here in a little bit. Mitchell Evans isn't a great blocker yet. Now, one of my things is Mitchell Evans is a guy that I'm not going to predict him as a breakout just yet. I'm going to go with kind of somebody else, but I won't be surprised if Mitchell Evans has a huge jump in year 3, because I'm anticipating, and this is why I'm not ready to predict it yet. I'm more saying don't be shocked if it happens, but I'm not predicting it, because in order to predict it, I need to see him make a big jump physically, not size-wise, but like he needs to get a lot stronger. Because, again, he is a converted quarterback, not so much a tight end by trade, If he has that kind of jump, then that may change some things, right? But for me, I have a feeling that Cooper Flanagan is going to be that guy that comes in early in the career, and you're like, yo, this guy's going to be a really good blocker for us. Does that mean he's going to be number 2 tight end? I don't think so. But I will not be shocked at all, especially when you consider the injury to Eli Raritan. I will not be shocked at all that if he's healthy, Cooper Flanagan is the number 3 tight end this year. When I mean number 3 tight end, not that if one of the top 2 tight ends goes down in a pass catching role, they put Cooper in there. That's what I'm talking about. I'm literally talking about the way that they use 12 and 13 personnel, where he'll be the guy that comes in and he's going to come in and be attached to the line of scrimmage and block a defensive end. I think he's going to be really good at that the moment he gets to campus. And the other tight ends on the roster, to be honest with you, that are healthy aren't that guy. Eli Raridan would be that guy if I thought he was going to be healthy, but I just don't see any scenario in which he's healthy at the beginning of the season. I just don't see it. I just don't see it. So
I don't think they want to rush Eli Raridan at this point as well.
yeah.
I think they're going to depend, which makes Cooper Flanagan and the point you're making more plausible, for the simple fact that they're not going to rush Eli Raridan.
Yeah.
And he's going to end up, you're going to end up seeing Cooper Flanagan being, and you know what? I didn't think Cooper Flanagan was that physical until I saw him play defense.
Yeah.
Once I saw him play defensive end in his senior year, I was like, oh, okay, this kid, he may be able to come in and play immediately because of his physical traits and the way he plays the game, which would go into him being a really good blocker. You're a good blocker at tight end, you're going to get on the field.
Yeah.
At
this team, yes. Yes.
At Notre Dame.
You know what's funny, Sean? You say that. Like, one of the things that kind of is like, okay, guys, like every time there's a defensive line deficiency, or they say, hey, we need a 300-pounder, like, hey, let's move X offensive lineman over there, right? There's always that comment,
Right.
And even though he's too slow-footed to play guard, let's move Rocco Spindler to nose tackle. Like, okay, I considered if you're going to go to a two-gapping defensive line, okay, let's consider that. However, for me, what I'm referring to more is the conversation about, well, just move this guy to the other side of the ball. Cooper Flanagan's not a guy that I would immediately poo-poo that if there was a need. There's not a need on this team. They don't need a guy like him at defensive end right now. They got a lot of guys like him. However, let's just say something happens over the next year, and all of a sudden you don't have any big ends. Like, you don't have good depth at big end, and you're loaded at tight end. Yeah, I'd move Cooper Flanagan over there because I think he could play there, not just like be a depth guy. He could play there. And I don't often say that about a lot of guys. And I'll say this is an interesting class because there are a lot of guys in this class that I think could play Notre Dame on both sides of the ball. I mean, you look at the defense, the opposite is true. Let's say there's some injuries at tight end. Guys don't pan out. There's some injuries. Hey, Coach Golden, Coach Laurinaitis, let me holler at you for a minute. Do y'all mind if we house Preston Zinter over here? Like, can we take him over here? Because that kid can help us, right? No doubt. I mean, that's a guy that can play on offense at Notre Dame. I mean, he flat out is. So, there's guys like that in this class. If Christian Gray wanted to be a wide receiver, he wouldn't be as good of a receiver as he is as a corner, but he could play there, in my opinion.
Josh Burnham could play two positions on offense.
Josh Burnham could do what we talked about with Preston Zinter. But Jeremiah Love, Michigan offered him as a DB. I mean, he could legit go play in the secondary. I don't want him to play there. Notre Dame sees him as an offensive guy. But the point is there's just a lot of good football players on this team, Sean, where you look at him and say, boy, this guy could play at this level, could play on both sides of the ball.
Yeah.
And guys like that, they're just not – you don't find a lot of them. And, I mean, look, if Notre Dame was a 21 personnel team, well, I'll put it like this. Wouldn't you – if they were still running the Lou Holtz's offense – there's a certain kid from Maryville, Indiana that I wouldn't mind seeing playing fullback in this offense.
Oh, absolutely.
Because the fullback under Lou Holtz was a guy that got the rock. You know what I mean? So I mean, there's a lot of dudes that could play both sides of the ball in this offense or on this football team in certain roles. And I think that adds to the value of what this class brings to the table for me, without question. You got any other predictions, Sean, for the incoming freshman class? It can be career-wise. I think one for me was here's a couple that Ryan had. Ryan said 2 wide receivers in this class will get drafted in the top 2 rounds of the NFL draft whenever they come out.
Yeah.
So he had that prediction, and I like how he didn't say specifically who it would be, because we all agree that, like, it could be Rico. He could break out and be that guy. It could be Caleb Smith. He could break out and be that guy. That's what makes this receiver class really impressive is, there's no guaranteed day one, this guy's going to be a star guys, but there's a lot of good football players in this group, with a lot of upside. And and they're going to have a chance to to be impactful players. And then here's one that I had, Sean. My bold prediction from back on signing day was at least 5 players in the defensive class will get drafted. From this defensive class will get drafted. And I could see 2 to 3 of them being day 1 or 2 picks. I think at least one of the linebackers gets picked. I think at least one of the DBs gets picked. And I would argue potentially 2.
Right.
I would argue at least potentially 2 of the linebackers. But where I think the most NFL potential in this, even though this position group right now is a big question mark because it's a low floor, high ceiling group, the most NFL potential on the defensive class is on the defensive line. I mean, I've said
from
this
an
before.
upside standpoint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If everybody taps into their full potential, you could argue that 3 of the guys on the defensive line have the most potential and most upside of anyone on the defense. You could make that case. I wouldn't necessarily quite go there, but I've said this before. If everybody taps out, I think Boubacar Traore is one of the 3 highest drafted kids out of this class. Either side of the ball.
Yeah, that's
either side of the ball.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now he's got a long way to go to get there. Long way to go. But he reminds me so much of Adetokunbo Ogundeji. Here's the exception though. He's already as big now as Adi was when he finished his 5-year career at Notre Dame.
Yeah.
He could end up being a 275, 280 pound defensive end with 80 plus inch wingspan and an explosive burst off the edge. Now, he could also be a guy, Sean, that never sees a meaningful snap in his career. He's very raw, but the tools are outstanding for Adetokunbo Ogundeji, for Boubacar Traore. And so Brendan Vernon's another guy. I don't think Brian's talked about this. A lot of people that think kind of Brendan's a high floor guy.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's a high ceiling guy. I think he's got a long way to go from learning how to play the game. Armo Mukum's a really interesting player. And a guy that doesn't get nearly enough love for being really talented is Devin Houston. I think that kid's really – I could be missing something here, but I saw a picture of the freshman class, like the early enrollees, like at the front with Marcus Freeman, and Devin Houston was the tallest guy of the group. I mean, he is going to be good, in my opinion. And so, to me, I think 2 of the defensive linemen, and then 3 guys on the back level, some way, some fashion, end up being drafted when it's all said and done.
He might be the one kid that elevates. When you go back and you look at a class 5 to 10 years from now, Devin Houston might be the one that you look at and say, yo, his 3 years, his 4 years in Notre Dame made this class even better than we thought it would be, right? And underrated, I would put him and Sam Pendleton right there as probably 2 of the most underrated players in this class.
That kid's strong.
Yeah. Because Sam Pendleton, with Harry Heastand.
He's a hairy guy.
Oh, absolutely.
And I mean that Harry Heastand guy, not getting
and
weird.
You know what I mean? He has a mindset or an alter ego similar to Quentin Nelson. Quentin is a really good, teammates love Quentin, really good dude off the field. Well, something clicks when he puts that helmet on and he turns into a totally different person. Mm-hmm. And that's Sam Pendleton. So
he's got that disposition that Harry loves.
Mm-hmm.
He puts the glasses on off the field.
Yeah.
He's an intellectual kid. He could sit there and talk scripture. He could sit there and talk politics. He could sit there and talk whatever. And then you put the helmet on and he's a big country boy that wants to destroy you.
Yeah.
And Harry loves those guys. He loves those guys that have that kind of intellect, but guys that when they get on the field, boy, they're going to rip your head off.
Rip your head off.
And those are the kind of guys Harry Heastand wants. And you're correct. Sam Pendleton has that kind of disposition. We'll see if he's athletic enough to be that kind of guy. But the mentality, and he's already 305. He's already strong as an ox. I'm very curious how he develops because you kind of look at Sullivan Absher and he kind of plays the way he acts, right? He's just a fun-loving kid, and he has fun playing the game, and talks a little trash, doing all. I mean, but Sam's just like it's like he's one of those switch kids, right?
Yeah.
It's the switch that when he gets on the field, that switch goes on, and he's a different cat when he's on the field than he is off of it. So that's a good one. Sam Pendleton's a guy to keep an eye on. Yeah.
When he learns technique, and look, I think we talked about this. Tomorrow, there's going to be a NFL playoff game that is going to show why Harry Heastand is the best, in my opinion. There are going to be 3 guys on the field in the 49ers Cowboys matchup that are going to show they dominate. You're going to have Aaron Banks and McGlinchey next to each other on the left side for the 49ers. And then just watch Zach Martin. If you didn't watch Zach Martin on Monday night against Vita Vea and the technician that he is, like you talk about the athlete and all that, the technician he is and how he out-leveraged Vita Vea all night long and just held him at bay while he tried to bull rush and he just anchors and just technique, just worked his big tail all night long.
Mm-hmm.
And that, for me, is what you were able to see Quentin Nelson. Like, they knew physically that Quentin Nelson was coming in practice. But once he learned the position, which I think Sam Pendleton is going to learn and pick up on early because of what you just talked about, he's a very bright kid. So I don't think it's going to take him a long time to pick up on technique, leveraging the right way to play the position. By the time he hits his sophomore year, you talk about him and Jagasol being next to each other on one side. That could be a pretty good combination as well.
Yeah.
So there are so many things to talk about with this 23 class.
Along those lines, Sean, one of the predictions I made on signing day was that Notre Dame would have 3 kids from this class start on the offensive line, be full-time starters, not like start a games.
Yeah.
And that may not seem like much, but if you go back and look at Notre Dame's great classes over the years, that would tie the most.
Yeah.
So they had that 5-man class in 2013. That was the McGlinchey-Elmer class.
Yeah.
That class technically had 3 starters, but like one of those guys, Colin McGovern, began the 2016 season as starter. He didn't finish the year as a starter.
Right.
So I don't really count him. Montelis never started. Hunter Bivin was never a start. Like Hunter Bivin had some spot starts in replace of injured guys, and he was a very good rotation player, but he wasn't like a full-time starter. It was Elmer and McGlinchey. The great 2014 class was probably the best hit percentage. Harry had 2 great hit percentage classes, like almost all of them hit. It was Q, Alex Barr, Sam Mustipher, and Jimmy Byrne. 3 of those 4 guys were multi-year starters at Notre Dame and have started games in the National Football League. That's a very high success rate for a position. 2015, the only starter from that group was Trevor Ruland, and he was a spot starter with injuries. And in 2016, he only signed 3 offensive linemen. 2 of them became multi-year starters, Liam Eichenberg and Tommy Kramer.
Yeah.
And you could argue that the 17 class was the best because you had 3 guys that were multi-year starters at Notre Dame, Josh Lugg, Robert Hainsey, Aaron Banks. And then even though Dylan Gibbons has never started Notre Dame, he was a multi-year starter at Florida State.
Absolutely.
Right. So that class hit 4 for 4. Right. And y'all kind of wonder, like,
if Harry doesn't leave, does Dylan Gibbons leave?
No, he's starting at right guard instead of Kane Madden last year. That's what happens if Harry doesn't leave. 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
And so but the point is 3 guys starting from a class is a very good success rate when you consider how you're stacking really good classes on top of each other. It's hard for that many guys from one class to become at least full-time starters for a year.
Yeah.
And I think Jagasol will be that guy. I think Absher will be one of those guys, and then it's okay. Who's that next guy? Is it Pendleton? Is it Otting? Is it Christopher Tarrick? It wouldn't shock me if it's more than that, but I going beyond that starts getting into territory like, hey, bro, that's like we haven't seen that before, and that's a bold prediction when you consider how good last year's class was and how good next year's class is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So, but I see 3 of those guys being full-time starters.
Let me ask you a question. You've been doing this for a while. You always do like upside for a class. At the top positions for the NFL, is this one of the first classes for Notre Dame where you feel like they have a first-round high upside guy at tackle, quarterback, cornerback, like the positions that go really high in the NFL draft. Is this the first draft of recruiting class in a while where you sit back and you say, yo, Notre Dame has high upside kids, first round, second round kids at these positions, and that are really important in college football as well.
I'd have to go to 2013. I don't know. I still would like to have seen like what Malik could have been if he wouldn't have got hurt and been able to develop as a quarterback. I thought he had a lot of ability as a quarterback. You look at Cole Luke was a guy that I loved coming out of that class as well.
For a while there, he was
until Van Gorder ruined him. And then you look at that class. I loved Mike McGlinchey coming out. I thought Mike McGlinchey had the highest upside in that class. I was not big on Montelis. I liked McGovern, but he ended up not panning out. I thought Bivin would be a good, solid backup. I really didn't think Montelis could play. I never understood that one. But I loved McGlinchey's upside, and the whole thing was kind of like with Joe Alt and some of these other guys is if he can put the weight on and keep that athleticism, because McGlinchey was like 250, 260 when he signed. Because he's a basketball player. If he can keep the weight on it, and Emil Wagner's the other one that is in that category. If he can keep the weight on and get up to 290, 295 and still maintain that athleticism, he's going to be special. And then I liked Steve Elmer a lot. He was obviously a 2.5-year starter at Notre Dame. So that 20, and then you also had dynamic receivers in that class with, I love Torrey Hunter coming out, but I didn't project any of them to be Will Fuller. You know what I mean? So I can't, this class to me, the reason I think this class is better is that class had some guys like that. I thought if Greg Bryant could have kept his head on straight, I thought he could have been a really good running back in like the next level. Torrey, I thought was going to always be a really good college back, but didn't have the explosiveness to be a guy that could be an NFL guy like that. I thought Torrey would be a really good kind of like third down back in the NFL, a Kevin Falk type. And had he not hurt his knee, I think that's where he was headed. But I thought Greg Bryant had like day 2 NFL draft pick ability if he could have kept his head on straight. I thought McGlinchey had first-round draft pick potential. I thought Steve Elmer had day 2 draft pick potential. I thought Jalen Smith was an elite player. I thought Max Redfield had day 2 draft potential, and I thought Cole Luke had that as well. And like you said, Cole Luke looked like that his first 2 years.
Absolutely.
I mean, he was a key reserve in 2013, and in 2014 he was excellent. Then he just kind of slowly regressed. The thing that hurts him, too, is he played in a bad strength program. Cole wasn't a naturally explosive player. He needed that push, and he never got it. Mm-hmm. And so playing with Paul Longo really hurt his development, in my opinion. This class, to me, has it at even more positions because that class only had 2 D linemen. It was Isaac Rochelle and Jacob Matuska. And I liked Isaac Rochelle, but Isaac Rochelle was exactly what I thought he'd be, a really good, solid, multi-year player that, was a, day 3 NFL draft pick. I also think Isaac Rochelle would have probably been picked higher if he had a better coach or better strength program and a better coach to begin with as well. But that's kind of who he was. He was sort of a self-made guy to a certain degree at Notre Dame, in my opinion. But this class has way more upside at more positions, right? Like,
absolutely.
With Malik, I had one of the best arms, like just powerful arms you're going to find. But he, as I've talked about before, he was making the transition from an option offense at Kettering Alter. So there was some projection there about okay, how's he really going to project, right? Love the tools, love the leadership and all that. But how's he going to project into a system? And we never got a chance to see him fully do that because of the injuries and then all the nonsense that happened in 2016. Kenny Minchey is more of a walk in the door, this kid's a college quarterback type of guy. Mm-hmm. Right, running back Jeremiah Love has every bit the upside that Greg Bryant and Torrin Folston had. I wouldn't have said that a year ago. I'd have said the upside is there, but I did question a year ago, is he a natural running back? He answered those questions for me this past year. Tight end, both classes had good tight ends. I actually liked Durham Smythe a lot. I was not shocked that he ended up becoming a 4th-round draft pick. I liked him coming out. I wasn't a big Mike Hireman fan. I think the offensive line classes are very similar. Like one really elite guy, McGlinchey in 13 with upside, Jagasol in this class, and then just a lot of really good players.
Yeah,
I never thought Steve Elmer was going to be like a star, like 5, but he's a really good player. He's going to be big, tough, strong kid that was going to be a good player for a long time. And then some other solid depth guys. This class is similar, but I think this class has more starting potential than that class had.
Absolutely.
Like there were 2 guys in that class that I just flat out weren't going to be starters at Notre Dame. And now I did like Hunter Biven because he was he could play center, he could play tackle, he could play guard. And I said, but I loved that pickup because I thought a guy like him you need in the offensive line. That like he played center in high school, he played offensive tackle in high school, he could play guard. Obviously, played guard at Notre Dame, but I never viewed him as like a starter.
Yeah.
Right? Montilus was not. I never understood the Montilus one. This class to me has 5 guys that could that have starting tools. Now they won't all start most likely because again, you signed some dudes like that in last year's class, and they're going to sign some dudes like that in next year's class, and it's just somebody gets hurt, somebody doesn't pan out. This is how it goes, right? And so who could have foreseen like what happened with Joey Tenona last year? You just never know. And so, but they all, if any of those 5 guys start someday, you're not shocked. You're not shocked. Now, Chris Tarrick to me would be kind of at the bottom of the guys I predict to start. But again, that's a kid, a big 6'5 plus 300 plus pound kid that you beat Wisconsin for.
Right.
And so if that's your bottom of your potential starting lineup, and like Joe Otting, the only thing that could keep him off the field is just can he gain the weight and maintain his athleticism? But like he's got really good tools.
Yeah.
And you've talked about Pendleton. So yeah, that offensive line class, Sean, brings a lot of that potential. And then the D-line class has way more upside. Now, the linebacker class has no one in Jalen Smith's league. Do you know who else in college football doesn't have someone in Jalen Smith's league? Every other team in America.
You think?
Okay?
Yeah.
But the depth of this linebacker class is so much better. I mean, like Michael Deeb and Doug Randolph. I was never a huge – I liked Doug Randolph as more of a 3-4 outside linebacker, but not as like an off-ball linebacker. I never saw him as an off-ball linebacker. I thought he was going to be a guy that was going to come up off the edge and be a pass rusher.
Right.
But it was Jalen and then a big drop off. Whereas this class is 3 really good players, and then the secondary had 2 really good players in it in 2013, Sean. But it, like a lot of Brian Kelly's classes, it came up short in numbers, and that was the issue. So like you got Cole Luke, who I loved. I don't know what you thought of him coming out of high school, but there was Cole Luke and Rashad Kinlaw, and Rashad Kinlaw wasn't it, and he was just kind of like a guy like you're okay. That's a
Throw
depth
in on the
guy.
back end.
Yeah, Devin Butler.
Yeah.
Devin Butler was a guy that I thought could be a good, good solid safety, good rotation guy, but not a guy that's looking and say, boy, that guy's going to be a dude. And Devin Butler was exactly what I thought he was going to be in college, right? Which is a nice, good depth player. If somebody goes down, he steps in and plays good football, and that's what he did in 2015.
Now he's coaching football out there on the East Coast.
Right, right.
So, yeah.
Because he had a good mind for the game, to your point, right? He just wasn't an elite athlete.
Right.
It's kind of like a lot like DJ Brown. He was a better athlete than DJ was, but, just DJ's not a really explosive athlete.
Yeah.
And so like if you remember when Kavari got hurt late in 2015, Devin stepped into the lineup and played good football. But he was a rotation guy, where this DB class to me has a lot more starters.
Yeah.
You recruited starters. I mean, Brandon Hillman, did you watch the Polynesian Bowl last night?
I watched a little bit.
Is a long.
Yes, he is.
He's got some range now. Obviously, we know Adon Schuler is a really good, steady player, and then Ben Minich is a guy that's really grown on me. And then the 2 corners are legit. So it was just the depth everywhere, Sean.
Yeah,
just like, man, you're getting dudes everywhere, and that's what I think some people are missing a little bit about how good this class is.
Yeah,
I agree. You can focus on the rankings all you want, but they landed really good football players everywhere.
That's why I asked the question, right? Because I couldn't remember a class where I'm looking and I'm saying, okay, quarterback, pass rusher, defensive back, wide receiver. Like
you'd have to go to 08, Sean. Was the last time that happened. That was the Dane Christ, Michael Floyd, Kyle Rudolph, class, and and the reason that class is probably the only other one that can compete with it is because that's one of those classes where Charlie actually got some really good DBs.
Yeah,
and now edge rushers, I liked Darius Fleming a lot. He was a good player. But you Ethan Johnson. Have we heard anything about him? Did they find him by chance? Do you have any idea? I haven't heard. I did a search about a month ago.
Yeah, I
didn't hear anything.
Yeah,
but he was a big time player to me. But the thing that separated that class from a lot of Charlie's other classes is he got 3 really good DBs in that class. Now again, he came up short in numbers, but I loved Robert Bland coming out of high school. He was an NFL draft pick. I love Jamar Slaughter coming out of high school. He was an NFL draft pick. And I'm going to say this right now. The best athlete of that group, had he not had been injured, would have been the highest NFL draft pick of all those guys, is Dan McCarthy.
Yes.
That dude could play, but he just could never stay healthy.
Couldn't stay healthy.
Jamoris might have also – I think Jamoris would have been drafted higher too if it had not been injuries. But Jamoris was a little undersized. Dan was like 6'1.5", 6'2", athletic as all get out. And that's what made that 2008 class so good from a recruiting standpoint. Was kind of that, like, you had guys a lot of different places.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's the key. And
because Morris went from kind of corner nickel back to safety, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And none of those guys were natural corners. Like, Blanton ended up playing corner, but he would have been better off playing safety in college. But he had to play corner for other reasons. But the big knock on that class for me, Sean, was off-ball linebackers. I liked Anthony McDonald as a thumper Mike, but he lacked some range. I thought he could have been a really good thumper Mike in a 3-4 type. But he got real tight and couldn't move. And then David Puzzlesny was one of those ones where you're like, great story, but that kid's not a Notre Dame football player. Like, there's a reason he's not going to Penn State, where his brother went.
Right.
But this class doesn't have that position. I mean, the closest you get to it is safety, but then again, Brandon Hillman could be a dude. Adon and Minich have talent. It's not a stretch. There's no David Puzzlesny that you're hoping can be better than you think that it could be. And I think that's the thing that I really like about this class. That makes it kind of exciting.
Yeah.
So, Sean, that's going to do it for the recruiting part. We're going to dump into some team stuff next. But before y'all go, just a reminder: you can find Sean's Lucky Lefty show. If you stand up, Sean, or sit up, Sean. Show him the merch that your wife got. You got that little Lucky Lefty deal there. You can find their show on the CFB Nation podcast app. So make sure that you subscribe there. You can find it on Apple, Google. I believe it's on Spotify as well. Definitely check that out. And then also our CFB Nation YouTube channel is now up and monetized. So we got 3 videos up there today that John Garcia and I did. We broke down Cormani McClain's film and explained why we thought he was the best cornerback in high school football this year, even despite some of the other issues that we have with Cormani and how he's handled his recruitment. But once the helmet gets put on, that kid can flat out ball. We broke down Deuce Robinson and Nicholas Harbor, and John talked about the latest in their recruitment, and then we broke down their film. All 3 of those videos can be found on the CFB Nation podcast channel. So, Mr. Davis, we're going to talk some breakouts, buddy. Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to get into some breakouts here. And and also you can find Lucky Lefty podcast also on the Lucky Lefty show also on YouTube. The podcast, CFB Nation, the show on YouTube. So just check that out as well. So, Mr. Davis, let's have some fun with some breakout players. So we kind of talked about it before. We had one guy in common, and let's start with him first. And that is the right tackle, Mr. Blake Fisher. And here's what a breakout can be. A breakout can be a guy who's a starter and a good player that becomes a star. It can be a guy that doesn't play much or is a rotation guy that becomes a really important part of the rotation. So a breakout doesn't have to be a guy that becomes a first-team All-American. It could be an example where Audric Estime was a breakout this year. Was he an All-American? No, but he hardly played the year before. Logan Diggs was a breakout this year to a degree. Didn't become a star, but went from, 200 yards rushing to 800 yards rushing. So it doesn't have to mean everybody's a star. But this one, Sean, is a breakout for us because you and I both believe that by the end of next season, people are going to be talking as much about Blake Fisher as they are about Joe Alt.
Joe Alt, absolutely. And I think it comes down to the fact, for me, he's very similar to Tyler Buckner in the sense of they were just robbed of being able to play the game. And once they play the game, you start to see their talent rise and why everyone thinks they're going to be as good as they were predicted as coming out of high school. Blake Fisher, for me, developed on both sides of the coin. I think he developed in pass pro. I definitely think you saw him fall in love with run blocking, in my opinion. And the mindset. The best test was something that you brought up last spring. And you were like, Sean, I just don't know. I just want to see how he meshes with Harry.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was solved this year.
Mm-hmm.
I think the young man took to Harry's teaching. And Harry told us before the season, not only with Blake Fisher, but Joe Alt, they're young. Relax. Everybody's throwing all these accolades at them. Relax. Because not only do I have to teach, but there are some things I have to tear down to build back up with these young men. Joe Alt was a little bit further along because he had played. He was used to the speed. He was used to a lot of different things. Blake Fisher, I think, was challenged in multiple ways. Harry Heastand, but then the way he responded to the challenge of Marcus Freeman. Let's go back to fall camp. And Marcus Freeman got up after practice and he put the responsibility on the player to be ready for the practice and what they're being asked to do. He was talking about Blake Fisher without talking about Blake Fisher because we happened to be at the practice. And it was Blake Fisher who had to call it quits halfway through practice physically because the pace was just too much for him. It was a hot day. And, hot days for big linemen are difficult more than for them more than anybody else on the squad. But the way he responded, he came back, got himself in shape. In my opinion, he ended up being the second best lineman, right behind Joe Alt. Most people can argue with Jared Patterson. Josh Lugg, I thought, took a step forward this year. Kristofik was just, Zeke Carrell was flat out, man, just a rock of Gibraltar at the center position. Everything you can want at that position. And what you saw from Blake Fisher, I think the ability for him to go through those challenges in the off season gave him the ability to come back in games because he's a different personality than Joe Alt. Joe Alt's personality is very even keel, Brian. He's very even keel. Like nothing's really going to rattle him, right? Blake Fisher has a mentality to whereas, he can get frustrated because he
Or
feels
really
like,
fired up. Right.
yes, right. He's not as even keeled. And sometimes when he's not playing as well in the past, you've seen things kind of like stack up on him in games. Now you go watch that Gator Bowl. Like you see him early on, okay. Once he adjusted to things, he came back and then he took off. And I just think that's the growth that he's shown as a player that is connected to the growth he's shown as a person dealing with and meshing with the teaching of Harry Heastand, being challenged by his head coach physically, responding to that. I think these challenges have made him a better player. And each rep, he's going to get better. And I think next year is going to be the year that you finally see him take off and start to catch up to Joe Alt. Because physically, most people would say physically, an NFL scout would look at Blake Fisher and immediately be like, oh, man. Whew. Right? But then they look at the film of Joe Alt and it's like, okay, that kid. This is where his film starts to catch up with the way he grabs the attention of most scouts just physically when he walks on the field. And now he becomes that dominant player that we always thought he could be at the right tackle position, which is going to make it very interesting because if he does that, I'm very interested in seeing where he lines up because if he's a first round pick, does he automatically leave? Or does he see himself wanting to give himself a chance to play left tackle if Joe Alt leaves to give him the opportunity to be seen at left tackle as well? It's going to be very interesting, but I fully expect him and Joe Alt. Now, I'll ask this question. Name me a starting tackle combination that's going to be better.
So here's my thing, Sean, and this is why some people kind of talk about like, you're a little too fired up about next year, and I'm like, yeah, you're probably right. Like I am. I'm always kind of fired up, like looking forward to the next year because until we see it, right? But when I look at it, you say, boy, they've got a guy that potentially has a chance to be a top 10 national quarterback, right? We'll talk about that at the end of the show.
Yeah.
You've got in my opinion, one of the 5 best running back rooms in college football. You've got arguably the best tackle tandem in college football coming back next year.
Mm-hmm.
You've got arguably the best cornerback tandem in college football coming back next year. It's arguable, but but the fact that it can be argued is it is certainly aspect of it. And so to me, you look at other parts of it, there's aspects of this team that are going to be as good as anybody in the country. I mean, ESPN, who is by no means a pro Notre Dame organization, did a way too early preseason list, and the only team that had more preseason All-Americans, and this is just one team, it's not second team, third team, just one, first team that had more than Notre Dame was Georgia. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so there's reasons to be optimistic and to be really fired up about what this team can be, but there are questions that still need to be answered, right? And so to me, if Blake has the jump, see, here's the thing, Blake doesn't even need to make the jump we're talking about, because here's what we're talking about. Sean and I are talking about this. Blake and Joe having similar results to what Q and McGlinchey had in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
Where they were both first-team All-Americans on almost. I think Q was unanimous, and I think Mike was consensus, if I remember correctly. I don't think Mike was also unanimous. I don't think.
No.
And so something like that, Sean, right? And even in 2016, they were both second and third-team All-Americans by different people. So I think that's kind of what we're looking at. But even if Blake just goes from what he was this year and just takes a normal kind of jump to they're still one of the best tackle tandems in college football.
Mm-hmm.
But what Sean and I are predicting with Blake Fisher is that he goes from being a pretty good player at times that's inconsistent to a pretty good player that's consistent a lot more of the time. Because for Blake, one of the things that Harry Heastan's always been very good about, and he had this issue with Ronnie Stanley, I think he had this issue with Quentin Nelson, is for different reasons. They had trouble controlling their emotions as football players. And I don't mean like they would throw hissy fits or temper tantrums. I just mean that, sometimes guys can get a little too hard on themselves.
Yeah.
Sometimes guys allow mistakes to turn into more. Like that was the issue with Ronnie Stanley early in his career. If he would make a mistake early, he would kind of beat himself up. And then it would lead to another mistake and another mistake and a false start, another kind of thing like that. And Coach Easton had to get him to be like, dude, just stay within yourself. And now, as good as he was in 2015, he's been even better in the pros because of the foundation that Coach Easton set. With Q, it was early in his career, he was just too out of control. He was too aggressive. He was too, wanting to go crush somebody. And then Coach Easton had to kind of find a way to harness that where you wanted to keep him super aggressive. Not to the point where he was whiffing on guys because he was coming off too hard. And so that's the thing. That's where Blake is to me. Blake's kind of a balance between those two guys where, Blake can beat up on himself a little bit sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
You can see it. And you got to be like, hey, you gave up a right tackle's got to be just like a corner. You're on an island, or left tackle's the same way. You're on an island. You're going to get beat, and everybody in the stadium's going to see it. Move on. Right. Don't make that mistake again, but move on. Emotionally, mentally, move on. Register. I underset. I got out of my stance slow. I overset. I shot my hands late. Recognize why you got beat, correct it, and then go kick the guy's butt the next play. But you could see with Blake, he would get frustrated at times. You could see it.
Yeah.
And so, but again, sophomore. Didn't grow up in the home of a 10-year NFL veteran, right? I mean, right? And so he's a kid that wants to be great. And that's where Blake's frustration would come from, is he wants to be great. And I also think this at times, I think the fact that Joe was so good, this is just me projecting, like my opinion and feelings. And I don't even know if this is was a conscious thing, Sean. I think subconsciously, I think the fact that Joe was so good put pressure on Blake to try to be that good instead of just worrying about himself. Right? But he's, again, young kid. Yeah. Blake's never been on a football field where he wasn't the best guy on the field.
That's what happens, right? Yeah.
Right. And so now that he's a year older and a year more mature, the baby face is going to start to go away a little bit. He's going to start to look a lot more like a grown man. The game is going to evolve, and the consistency is going to be there. And it's going to kind of, to me, like get to the point where it's not, I got to be as good as him, but hey, oh, okay, I saw you pancake that dude the next time. Watch what I'm about to do. And then it becomes like a, let's go do this together kind of thing. And I think that's the next step for Blake is that consistency. And then just, dude, don't worry about Joe. Don't worry about anybody else. You worry about you from the standpoint of how you're affecting. Now, there's always, hey, we're doing a duo block together. That's what I'm talking about.
Right.
But
Right.
as far as like how you're playing, you worry about you. And if that happens, Sean, and he continues to take the Coach Heastand's coaching, this kid's going to end up being like okay, let's have the debate at the end of the year, Sean. Who was the more dominant player? And that's what we're predicting. Am I speaking? I'm speaking for you, but that's where you see it as well.
You're spot on. You're spot on. And that's the challenge for him. He wants to be great.
Yeah.
Like, he wants to be great, and he expects that of himself. And I think that's where his frustration comes from sometimes, because he feels like it should be automatic. But you know how it is, man. Anything in life, what you need to get to that success is discipline. And the discipline comes in different times for different people, right? Joe Alt had the discipline by living with someone that was able to show him. So
and
by
his style of play is better suited to being a disciplined guy.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Blake, his discipline, he had to be broke down in some ways and exposed in some ways. Now, see, some people can take exposure personal and get really defensive,
right,
and won't grow from it. And that's what coaching is all about, right? Because if you're coaching someone, you're basically exposing their game. That's what you're doing. You're exposing, okay, this is what you need to do to get better. How they take that and grow from it is ultimately what makes these young men success on the college football level, and then the next level when they get to the NFL, where everybody is physically good.
Right.
Except for the unicorns that are just blessed beyond belief, and can do things that no one else can do. But you hit it spot on, man. I just think the young man is going to piece it all together this year, and he's going to take off. He's going to take off. So, yeah.
If that happens, this offense is going to be really good.
Yeah.
Really, really, really good. If you're still talking about Justin Scott visiting tomorrow, please check the message board. We have a report on that. Yes, just take a deep breath, folks. So, Sean, here, let's go prediction numero deuce. Okay.
Yeah.
Who's your next guy? Who's your next breakout? Because I thought one of them, we have the same position, but a different guy.
Yeah.
I thought your number 2 one. So let's work from bottom up. I thought your number 2 one was really fascinating. It was not what I would have predicted you would have said.
And I think, I was trying to remember if I said him first or second, but for me, Lorenzo Styles Jr. has a good chance to be a breakout next season. And look, I don't know.
The tools are there, Sean.
You can't tell me. It's like all of a sudden he struggled this year. Everybody forgot what he did as a freshman
and what we thought he was going to do last year.
Absolutely. And I think there are some things that played into it, but then I just think mentally, at some point he checked out. And I think that was a challenge early. And that was a challenge. So now you have a staff that's trying to get a kid back mentally, right? Because when you lose it, now look, we want you to play, but heck, we just have to get you to block at this point and catch the ball consistently. Like, we're going back to the basics with you now. This isn't about what you did on that route or getting into things like that. This is like, man, catch the ball, block, and we're not even throwing the ball to you down the field. And I'm not saying they specifically did that, because we all know there were limitations in offense when it comes to like passing down the field.
Right.
But I think that was one of the things that did really hurt him, because, in my opinion, he's one of the most versatile pieces in that wide receiver room when it comes being able to be moved around, play different positions. He's the one guy that can get you some yards after catching the screen game. He was the one guy that you saw that could take the top off the defense, on the post route and some other routes. Consistently, you saw that his freshman year. It's just mentally he checked out. And I don't know what it was. Right. I really don't know what it
Because they
was.
tried to build the offense around him the first 2 weeks, Sean. I mean, they were throwing him
Absolutely.
deep balls against Ohio State. They threw him an RPO the first play of the game. Like,
Absolutely.
I don't know what it was. I mean, they were trying to get him the ball.
But I think in the Marshall game, he has the drops. He gets frustrated.
Drops that crosser against Cal.
And then things just built up on him, frustration. Then Tyler gets hurt. And then it just kind of snowballed on his roommate. Right. And he just kind of just lost it. But it was good to see him at the end of the year buy in to what the team had become. Like, because I think it affected every area of his game. But you started to see,
according to some sources, including how he acted him off the field.
Yes.
He did not have the best attitude off the field either. And I think that was a big part of it. And I'll say this, Sean, because the thing that you said to me was this. I'm going to give people a little inside baseball or inside look at our conversation earlier. Your comment was if he stays that you made to me. And I think that has to still be applicable now. Now, obviously, Notre Dame passed one giant hurdle. He didn't jump in the portal in December, January. That's a big first step. Now, if they can keep him from jumping in the portal post-spring, then that's the big one. And the reason it's important, Sean, because Lorenzo's not staying if he doesn't buy in. It's not going to happen.
No.
The staff won't want him to stay if he doesn't buy in.
Yeah.
The point being that if Lorenzo's on the team next year, for me, it increases the odds that he has gotten his head on straight. Because what Lorenzo went through this year had nothing to do with his physical skills. It had to do with it being up here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
that young man, in my opinion, could be one of the biggest stories of the year, right? Because what happens is everyone talks about Tobias. Everyone talks about Caleb Smith. Everyone talks about the freshman coming in, right? You have a dude that has done it. He has confidence, like, yo, I came as a freshman and I was killing it.
Right.
Like, I went to the Fiesta Bowl against Oklahoma State, and I put up numbers.
And he had big plays against North Carolina, big plays against USC, big play against Virginia. I mean, he wasn't a guy that here's the point, Sean. We're not still talking about what we saw from Lorenzo in high school.
No.
We're talking about what we saw from Lorenzo in his first year at Notre Dame. And that's the thing is, like, with Tobias, to a degree, we're still projecting what he was in high school.
Yeah.
Because he only caught one pass. He should have caught more. I mean, he was open other times, but there's still a level of projection there from high school. Lorenzo's like, no, dude, just give me the guy we saw in the Orange Bowl or the Fiesta Bowl. Just give me the guy that we saw against USC. Just give me the guy that we saw against North Carolina.
Yeah.
And those are the things that to me are going to be very, very important.
Let me give you the key as well. Veteran quarterback as a freshman. Young quarterbacks as a sophomore. Veteran quarterback as a junior. You think it doesn't matter? It matters. Like, there are a lot of and when you pointed out something, you would just keep it a buck. If he didn't want to get back to that player, he more than likely could have been one of the people in the portal.
He's out. Yeah.
In the portal. So that kind of makes you feel good about where he is.
He's at least taken a step, right? That's the thing.
And he's locked in, which goes back to what I said. I watched him block at the end of the season. I'm like, oh, okay.
Right.
Like, he's bought in. He's kind of realized, okay, this season isn't going to be what I thought it would be. But you know what? I'm locking in for us to win football games.
No. The concern for me, Sean, is that he still didn't catch a pass in the bowl game.
Yeah.
He still wasn't running with the effort and the speed needed in the bowl game. So it wasn't completely bought in. but at least you saw progress. So that was a good one. One of my others is actually Deion Colzie. Now, I'm not making this prediction from the standpoint of I think Deion is going to go out this year and be Notre Dame's guy. He's going to be the guy. He's going to be the alpha. He's going to be the number one guy. I'm not ready to go there yet. But where I am ready to go for now is that he's going to have a big breakout from what he was this season. And the kind of breakout I see is more of a Corey Robinson breakout.
Mm-hmm.
And if because Deion this year had 9 catches for 192 yards and a touchdown. And it reminds me a lot of 2013 when we saw Corey Robinson catch 9 passes for 157 yards and a touchdown. The next year, Corey comes out. He has 40 catches for 539 yards and 5 touchdowns as sort of that boundary guy. That's the kind of breakout I think we'll see from Deion Colzie. I think somebody else is going to break out and become the guy. I don't know if that's going to be Lorenzo. I don't know if that's going to be Tobias. I don't know if that's going to be a tight end. I don't know who that's going to be. Mm-hmm. But somebody is. But I do feel good at least about saying that I see a Deion Colzie, Corey Robinson type of jump in year 3. Deion's first year was basically just wasted because he wasn't coached. Now I want to see him kind of take that next jump. You know what I mean? And that's what I want to see from him. I think he's a guy that I see as being that potential breakout player for Notre Dame next year at wide receiver, as a guy that goes from 9 catches to 40, 50 catches for, 5, 6, 700 yards next season. That's my number 2. What's your third prediction, Sean?
Logan Diggs. He was my number 1. And what I mean by that is, this will kind of parlay into what we're going to talk about next. I started looking at where this offense could really go, right? And it reminds me, by no means, this is not apples to apples, okay? But the lightning thunder combination, the running back, the quarterback, veteran quarterback that most feel like can be a Heisman contender, and then big wide receivers. Reminiscent of what we used to see with USC, with Matt Leinart, Lindell White, Reggie Bush. Like I said, it's not apples to apples. I'm not saying these guys are those guys, but I can see Sam Hartman throwing for 3,500 to 3,800 yards like Matt Leinart did. I can see Logan Diggs and Archie estimate both surpassing 1,000 yards rushing or getting close to it. I can see a wide receiver getting close to 800-900 yards and receiving yards. 2 of them, as a matter of fact. Double-digit touchdowns for 1. I just think the capability of the offense and what Logan Diggs can do and what we saw he can do on the ground and in the passing game in that Gator Bowl is just the tip of the iceberg. Like, once again, I was thoroughly impressed. We both agreed that most people would disagree with us, Brian. We watched the film. We both agreed the best running back was Logan Diggs last year. I know that's how I felt for Notre Dame. He was the best running back. And you look at his versatility.
So all around, right?
Yes,
From all around, right?
Yeah.
Audric was the best pure runner.
Downhill running. Yeah.
Right.
Well, we're talking about all around. We know the conversations we were having in April and May, Brian. We know the conversations we were having. So to know where that young man came from just in April, May, to what he put on the field for Notre Dame, constantly seeing 7 and 8 man fronts, he's just scratching the surface, in my opinion, on what he can do.
And he missed a chunk of the offseason of preparation going in. Like Logan Diggs was not in the best shape of his life.
No.
Because he couldn't do hardly any upper body work until the Ohio State game.
Right.
Because he was dealing with the shoulder issue. and whereas Audric Estime kind of shows up, Sean, in day one, and he looks like a Greek god. You know what I mean? Like he just kind of showed up as that dude.
Yeah.
And so, like, to me, here's the thing, Sean. To me, Audric is who he is. Like, really good back, but this is what you're going to get the next 2 years. The only thing that to me might change about Audric is refining his footwork, refining his game, being more consistent. But like, this is his game, and he's just going to have normal incremental jumps. I think the point that you're making, and I agree with, is that Logan has got a lot of he's got another jump in him. Audric doesn't have another jump to me. Audric's just going to steadily get better because he's going to refine his craft, right? Because physically, he is who he is. You don't want him to get bigger and stronger, right? He is what he is. All the improvements Audric's going to make are going to be technical improvements, experiential improvements.
Yeah.
Logan will make those same improvements, but Logan has a physical jump that is still there to be made, in my opinion, if he can stay healthy. And that's the point that I'm making, where he is not my breakout guy just because I kind of think he already broke out last year. And I don't think he's going to become the guy the way that you're predicting, which is totally fine. I mean, if he does, if he becomes that guy and everybody's healthy, it means he's going to be a star, right? I still think it's going to look a lot more like this year, where it's that 1-2 punch with Tyree being that do-it-all guy. I pray that's what it looks like this year. But to your point, the reason I could see it happening is because, as you said, he does have he has a really good all-around game. He was injured a chunk last year because here's the thing. It wasn't just the shoulder. The shoulder is what happened in the blue gold game that cost him the summer. He was dealing with a hamstring injury all winter. And so Logan did not come into camp in the best shape of his life. You can see it in the pictures of the running backs. Audric's ripped up. Jadarian's ripped up.
Yeah.
Jabron Payne's ripped up. Chris Tyree's ripped up. And then there's Logan Diggs, who just kind of, looks different. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because he missed a lot of the offseason workouts that year. He doesn't have a naturally defined body anyway. He's never going to look like Audric Estime. The point, however, is that with a healthy offseason, this is a kid to me that is going to could make a big jump.
Absolutely.
Physically. And that's the difference between him, Audric, and Tyree and Jadarian Price. None of those guys have they've already made it. They've already done it.
Yeah.
They've already made the big physical jump. And Logan, to me, has not. And that's going to be the key.
So don't be shocked. Most people looked at the South Carolina game and were like, oh, well, that he made that play because South Carolina is slow.
Right. No one said that beforehand. Nobody said that coming into the game.
No.
Right.
No. That's a young man that was rounding into shape the more they got into the season.
And also, speed's overrated, Sean. I mean, look, here's the deal. If I'm a 4.6 and you're a 4.4 and I got a 10-yard head start on you, you're not catching me. I mean, Tony Jones had an 80-yard touchdown at Notre Dame. Dexter Williams had a 97-yard touchdown. He was a 4.6. You know what I mean? Like, it's explosiveness. It's about angles and all that. And Logan and Audric both have a really good feel for the game, but I think Logan is the most natural runner. He's the most natural running back that they have. And so for me, I that's why I've said, and I know Audric's the fan favorite, and I could see Audric becoming that guy too, depending on how the offense evolves. Yeah. But you got to remember something else that's going to give Logan a heads up. Tommy Rees loves Logan Diggs. Loves Logan Diggs.
He's a prototype running back for his offense.
Yes. Like, I don't think y'all understand. He loves Logan Diggs.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's a part of it too, because like you said, he fits that offense really well. Now, Logan's got to improve in some areas as a sophomore, going to be his junior year, but the tools are certainly there. Here's my third. I'm going to have a little bit of fun with my third one, Sean, and that is my third guy is Holden Stace, the tight end. So for me, Sean, I'm going this way. I'm not predicting he's going to be the guy at tight end. Okay, so hear me now. It's not going to be the guy.
Yeah.
But I think he's going to have a breakout. I think he's going to become a very important piece to this puzzle because Eli Raridan is banged up. Mitchell Evans is good, but Mitchell Evans isn't the volume guy that a Michael Mayer needed to be, where he was going to take up all the oxygen in the room at tight end, right? I think what we're going to see this year, because we started to see it in the bowl game, They were both out in routes a lot in the 12 personnel stuff. And what I think that you're going to see is with Mitchell as the one, because here's the thing: when Mayer was the one and Mitchell was the two, Mitchell was more of a blocker. But if Mitchell becomes the one and Holden's the two, then they're both going to be used more as route runners.
Right.
And so I think you're going to see them do more stuff out of 12 personnel, like we saw in the bowl game, where, hey, we can run out of this, but we're going to throw out of this a lot more than we did in the past as well. And also, Mitchell wasn't really 100% till we got into later in the year, speed-wise, because he was coming back from the foot injury. And so we saw him a little bit fresher and healthier in the bowl game too. So it wouldn't shock me if Mitchell becomes like a 50-catch guy this year at tight end or a 40-catch guy. I'm not predicting Holden's going to be the number one, but the reason I'm putting him in as a breakout, Sean, is because I am predicting that Holden Stace is going to have 20-plus catches next year. Now, he had one this year. If Notre Dame's number 2 tight end becomes a weapon in the pass game where he has 20 catches for 350 yards and 3-4 touchdowns, how do you defend this offense? Like if their number 2 tight end can start catching the football, how do you defend this offense? And I think I look at it and I'm sort of kind of looking at the prototype of look at Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
Like in one of my big knocks on the offense, and this goes back for years, even before Tommy Rees. So this isn't a Tommy Rees insult. This is just kind of is you put this number 2 tight end in the game and you never throw him the ball.
Yeah.
It makes no sense to me. Because now you're telling the defense, hey, even if he runs a route, we're not looking at him. We're looking at these 4. And I think that limits you and it makes it easier for you to be defended. What makes Georgia so hard to defend is, honestly, there was a lot of times this year where they had 2 really talented tight ends and 3 solid receivers on the field at a time. Right? But what made them dangerous is because they were all options.
Mm-hmm.
So if you spend all this time trying to stop Ladd McConkey or Brock Bowers or whatever, now all of a sudden, okay, now you got this big horse running down the middle of the field named Darnell Washington, right? Well, if you try to stop the tight ends and you're leaving McConkey or Arian Smith or A.D. Mitchell or whoever else on the one-on-one outside, Marcus Roseme and all those guys, then okay, then they're good enough to beat you. And with the scheme, they're going to scheme those guys open. I think Tommy Rees is great at scheming receivers open. I do. We saw it all year this year. If he can start getting all 5 weapons more involved in the pass game, this offense is going to be really hard to stop. Now, you can't do it all the time. You got to have some 7-man protections and some 6-man protections, and I get all that, especially in the play action game. You don't want to release both tight ends on a play action. You want to at least have one of them showing pass. But a lot more frequently getting both tight ends, and if I'm right, and Holden Stace has a breakout, meaning he goes from like 1 catch to like 20 plus, along with Mitchell kind of having a breakout as well, because I could have easily gone there. I'm just trying to make a different point. Then I think this offense becomes very, very hard to defend because you've got running backs that can catch the ball, Sean. You got receivers that can catch the ball, and you got tight ends that can catch the ball. You got to use them. And that's where I think we're going to see this team evolve a little bit, is more of that kind of stuff where maybe you keep your back in and release both tight ends on some plays. And then the next play, you keep your tight end in and you release your back, and then some plays you have everybody out. And I think when you've got a quarterback with Sam Hartman's experience, if he can pick the offense up relatively quickly, you can do a lot more free release routes. Absolutely. Because he knows where the hot is. He knows who I'm throwing hot off of. And that's what killed Notre Dame against Navy, is they had beaters built into their pass game to beat those pressures. Drew just didn't know who they were and couldn't throw off of them. So he'd see them coming unblocked and he'd just kind of panic and just take a sack. But if you go back and watch the film, you're like, dude, throw the cross. They're literally running a receiver to where the blitz is coming from. Like, throw the freaking ball, and it just didn't happen. Well, that's always going to happen at times, but when you got a veteran quarterback that can say, hey, you want to bring pressure? That's cool. I'm getting this sucker out, and I'm going to burn you with it. Yeah. Because the thing about his Wake Forest offense, that it was really good. He had a lot of those big tree receivers, but the way they run their mesh, like he didn't, and the way they built it, they didn't have a ton of guys that you could say, hey, just get that dang ball out to him and let him go. Notre Dame's going to have a lot more of that. They are. They're going to have a lot more of that next year. And so to me, that's something that I'm looking forward to seeing from this offense with Sam Hartman. And I think the other thing too is when you have a guy like Tyler Buckner, if Tyler Buckner's a starter, whether it be he beats him out, whether he gets hurt, whatever the case may be, here's the thing, Sean, is when you have a guy like that, you don't want to blitz him. You do not want to blitz Tyler Buckner because it might work out. It might work out. But if it doesn't and you don't hit home, he's going to kill you. And you want to here's some stats for you, Sean. I'm a numbers guy, right? Because I like proper context.
Yeah.
Last year, Drew Pine, when blitzed 91 times, he went 42 of 77 for a 54.5% completion rate, 590 yards, 10 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. Okay, that's what happened when he was blitzed. Sam Hartman last year when blitzed on 235 dropbacks, so he got blitzed a lot more. He completed 62.8% of his throws, averaged 9.1 yards per attempt, threw 24 touchdowns and 5 picks when blitzed. That's
incredible.
Pretty good.
Yeah, that's incredible.
And if you look at the year before, one of the things that made Notre Dame's offense so good is Jack Cohn was able to beat the blitz with the ball, especially late in the year when things started getting better. And you look at Jack's numbers the year before, Jack was at 66.9%, 9.2 yards per attempt, 13 touchdowns, 1 pick.
Yeah.
Right. And you put that kind of production on, and this is why you and I would always say, Sean, if Jack Cohn, I don't know if we've ever said this in a show, but you and I have said this to each other a million times during the season. If Jack Cohn was the quarterback on this team, insert win over such and such team.
Absolutely.
Because he would have been able to protect the run game.
Well, we said that in the offseason. We said if Jack Cohn was coming back, this team would go to the playoffs. Because we knew we respected what Jack Cohn did for that team the previous year. Some other people might have felt like, oh man, it's like, no, Jack Cohn, by the end of the year, you bring him back with an offensive line like Notre Dame had this year, because he played behind an offensive line that was spotty at best, that couldn't run the ball.
Even when it was good late in the year, it was still not very good.
It was still not very good. And you put him behind man, dude, if Jack Cohn had played this year, they might have put up 60 on Clemson. Because they were running the ball at will. And you add in play action.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's a little bit hyperbolic, 60, but still. Look, that's just how important is
well, I think that adds to the breakout of the running backs too that you're talking about. Because
and when I say that, I mean when I mention Logan Diggs, I'm talking about I just think all around yards from scrimmage.
Right.
I think he's going to eclipse 1,500.
Well, here's the thing, Sean. I could see them both staying in the same category in carries. I don't think Notre Dame's going to have more carries next year than they did this year.
Mm-hmm.
If anything, maybe a tad less. But the difference is what I think you're going to see if the pass game can be a better complement to it or become a legit weapon is the carries stay the same, 150 or so each. But then all of a sudden, Logan's yards per carry goes up from 4.98 to 5.98. Right? And so he was at 165 carries this year in 12 games, right? So let's just say he just has that jump from 4.98 to 5.98. His yards go from 822 to 987. Same number of carries. That's a big jump, So you look at Audric Estime. Let's say he doesn't make quite as big of a jump, but let's say he goes from 5.9 to 6.5. And all of a sudden, he's over 1,000 yards. You're talking about two guys on the same number of carries. If they can just jump their yards per carry, a yard in one case, a half a yard in the other, you're talking about 2,000-yard backs, and you didn't have to give them the ball any more than you normally did.
No.
Than you already have. And now you're efficient, your drives are going on longer, and that's where you still have the same number of plays or even more plays because now you can throw the ball more because you're not 3-and-outing it as much. And so those are all things that you look at and you say, boy, those are the aspects of it. And I'll kind of go back to where I was before, but that's kind of where I say it's really important that you get a little bit more out of the tight end position, because that could be the thing that ultimately makes this team, a lot more effective is when you can really have the weapons that you need to have across the board. I think it's where you start getting kind of really be really effective there, in my opinion. So yeah,
we had a discussion this week. I think this might be one of the biggest or the most tempting seasons for Tommy because I think he's going to be tempted, especially if Hartman makes the adjustment that we think he's going to make. Tommy's going to be tempted. He's going to be tempted. He's a quarterback. He's going to be tempted to throw the ball around. So it's interesting to see how many attempts per game do you think Hartman is going to get? And going to those two backs, how many carries per game do you think they're going to average? Do you think they both get 15 apiece? Maybe one of them gets 2 or 3 more, depending upon the game or the vibe or the situation or the flow. It's going to be interesting to see how Tommy manages everything.
Here's my belief, Sean, and I really do believe this, and I think we've seen it. I believe, here's your thought is, boy, if you get a guy like Sam Hartman, is this going to? We have a lot of Oklahoma State games. If you know Tommy Rees, that was a game plan out of necessity, not a game plan out of this is who I want to be.
Yeah,
I have always said this, that Tommy Rees's offense was working at its peak form of how I believe he wants it late in 2022 before all the offensive line injuries happened. That's what I think.
Yeah.
Because if you remember, this year they finished 70th or something like that in plays. Last year they were 43rd. In 2020 they were 3rd in plays. Now that's somewhat skewed by the fact that not every team played 12 games.
Yeah.
But still, they're not going to go from 3rd to 60th. But there was a stretch that began with Georgia Tech and really Clemson that the rest of the year where you just kind of saw there was a 4-game stretch where this is who Tommy Rees wants to be.
Mm-hmm.
They went for 208 rushing and 310 passing against Clemson. They went for 274 rushing and 283 against Boston College. They went for 199 and 279 against North Carolina, 283 and 285 against Syracuse. In that 4-game stretch, they went for 6.6 yards per play, 7.2 yards per play, 6.9 yards per play, and 7.4 yards per play.
Yeah.
And to me, that is where I think Tommy Rees wants to be. I think that Tommy Rees wants to be that guy that they're not a Lincoln Riley, Oklahoma, TCU now kind of system where they're out there just ripping off 50-yard play after 50-yard play after 50-yard play, but maybe they're not the most efficient offense.
Yeah.
He wants to be explosive. He wants to be an offense that can create big plays. But the biggest thing is the efficiency aspect of it. And he also knows that the best way to be efficient is to be balanced. And that's why I say when you look at that stretch, and I think he's going to even have an even better quarterback there, but they're in that stretch, Sean, they average 7 yards a play. And that's as they're, chasing for a playoff berth. I mean, they were undefeated going to that point in time. And just for context purposes, if you look at college football this year, 7 yards per play would have put them 6th in the country. Actually, let me look at that. It had been 7.00. So they had been 6th in the country, right behind UCLA at 7.01. Notre Dame would have been 7.0 on the dot. Georgia was at 7.17. USC was at 7.18. Tennessee was at 7.23. And Ohio State led the nation at 7.28. So, if you're at 7 yards a carry, you are in an incredibly efficient situation. And I think that's where he wants to be, where if you want to play to take away this, then I'm going to kill you with this. If you want to play to take this away, then I'm going to kill you with this. Meaning some games, there may be a game where they throw for 100, rush for 130 yards and throw for 350 because that team just would not get out of 8 of the box. So why should we try to hammer the ball into the box when they didn't get out of it. And so we just ripped them up.
Yeah.
And then there's going to be games where a team tries to play balanced, and you can't play balanced against the Harry Hiestand offensive line. They're going to rip you up. And that's what Georgia did in 2017. And that's why they beat Notre Dame. They said, you are not going to run the ball on us. We are going to go 8-9 in the box the entire game. We're going to make you beat us throwing the football. And in 2017, Notre Dame couldn't do that to good teams, Sean. In 2018, they couldn't do that to good teams. In 2019, they couldn't do that to good teams. In 2020, they couldn't do that to good teams. In 2021, they couldn't do that to good teams. In 2022, they couldn't do that to good teams. That's why it was so important to get a guy like Sam Hartman and to get a guy like Tyler Buckner and hopefully develop him. Because either one of those guys, and that's why Kenny Minchie is important. That's why CJ Carr is important. Because if you can be balanced, and that's what makes Georgia so hard to defend, right? Because you look at last year's game. So Alabama just comes out and says, we're not going to let you run the ball on us. So Georgia finally hits a couple plays and throwing the football. Mm-hmm. And then what did that do for them in the fourth quarter? It opened up the run game, right? And that's just kind of what you have to be. You have to be able to say, hey, if you're going to try – TCU took Michigan's run game away from being a dominant force.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, we're going to make you beat us throwing the football. And so their quarterback those 2 pick sixes because he wasn't ready for that. He wasn't ready for that yet.
Yeah.
I think he'll be fine. He'll be ready for that in the future. JJ's going to be a good player.
Absolutely.
But he was never asked to be that guy. Like the plays
they
he was making against
to play their game.
Right.
Play our game, our up-tempo game.
Exactly. Because Ohio State, he's hitting like play action shots over the middle, over the top to wide open guys. And TCU made him say, we're going to keep you in the pocket. We're going to make you throw the ball because we're not going to let you run on us. And it worked. I mean, after that 54-yard run, Michigan didn't run the ball all that great. Most of they finished with like $180.
Yeah.
But like they had a 54-yard run the first play. And then McCarthy was scrambling for chunks in the second half. I mean, that's where a lot of their rushing yards came from. It wasn't like lining up and running the ball. So they took Michigan out of their game, and Michigan wasn't efficient enough and good enough to beat them throwing the ball. Now, Michigan still scored points, right? But they lost because they made those big mistakes because they had to throw the ball to win, and they couldn't.
And then another thing, playing that style exposed Michigan's defense.
Right.
Because Michigan's defense was not used to being on the field
as
much, and they weren't as physical as the Michigan defense from last year, nor were they as good as rushing the passer, right? So spread them out, get them out of their comfort zone, make them play more plays than they used to. And you saw in the second half, TCU was scoring in the first half, but they started popping big chunk plays in the second half. Why? Because this was a style of game that Michigan wasn't used to in the Big Ten, when they could just sit up there and pound you for 4 quarters, and their defense can take possessions off because the offense is out there for 10 plays, 12 plays, and they're just sitting on the sideline and they're fresh late in the third and the fourth quarter. Nah, TCU was like, no, we're not going to let you play in your comfort zone.
Yeah.
You're going to play our style of game, and we're going to see if you're good enough to beat us playing our style of game. And Michigan just wasn't – they didn't have the offensive – flexibility that you were talking about because J.J. McCarthy wasn't ready.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that they didn't have the receivers and the talent. Quarterback just wasn't ready to do that because they have the tight ends. They have 2 tight ends that you saw that.
Right. And their receivers are good, but they're not take a game over like Quentin Johnson did.
No.
And that's what they were missing. So, Sean, that was a good conversation, and that led us from breakout players into that, and it came to kind of circle it back. It's because to be that type of offense, you need to have balance from a weapon standpoint. It can't just be a dude. It can't be a situation where if you can take Will Fuller out, you can stop Notre Dame.
Right.
Or if Will Fuller takes himself out by having a bad game like he did against BC in 2015. Remember those drops he had against BC? It was the only game I remember him having big drops.
Yeah.
It was that. He would have some silly drops early in his career, but he always was clutch. Now, BC game, he had some bad drops. They had a fumble by CJ. They weren't efficient. You took Will out of the game, and all of a sudden Notre Dame's struggling to hang on against a team that sucked. And so because somebody else had to step up and beat you, and Notre Dame didn't really have anybody that could step up else and beat you. Although Chris Brown made a huge money play in the end zone on that ball that he outplayed he just mossed the BC DB. And this year, if you could stop the run game, Notre Dame didn't have a chance against a good team. So next year it's got to be a thing where you've got multiple players, and if it's They didn't cover Holden Stace in because here's what that means, right? So, let's say Deion Colsey is the Corey Robinson type production. And let's say Tobias, Lorenzo, one of those guys breaks out and is like an 800-900-yard guy, and the run game's going for 220 a game, and Sam Hartman's efficient, all that kind of stuff. You're going to get in the playoff against Georgia, and they're going to be like, okay, we can stop that and that and that.
Yeah.
We're going to slow that down.
Yeah.
That's when a guy like Holden Stace becomes that guy that you're like, wow, where'd that guy come from?
Yeah.
Right. And that's where those guys can be important because, like, hey, you can't stop all of us. And so, like, TCU, they were able to – Quentin Johnson didn't have the impact that you thought he was going to have for two reasons. One, Georgia game plan, and two, the quarterback missed him on some big play opportunities. So you couldn't keep up because if Quentin Johnson didn't go off and Kendre Miller wasn't going off, then there weren't as many other guys who could take a game over.
Yeah.
My point is if Holden Stace has a breakout, that's the kind of game where that's the difference between winning and losing, is because you come out with this game plan where you're going to say, hey, we're going to stop your number one tight end and we're going to stop Deion Colsey because we've got a corner that we can just put on him. He's that good, right? Kool-Aid McKinstry can take Deion out of the game by himself. Our other corners, Terry Arnold's good enough to slow down Lorenzo Styles, and we're going to game plan to take Mitchell Evans out of the game, to stop your run game.
Yeah.
Right. And our linebackers, are this or that or the other thing. Okay. That the great teams can do that. Bama can do that. Georgia can do that. Well, Bama can do that now because I have a feeling Saban's going to hire a better defensive coordinator. I don't think Pete Golding could have figured that out, but they'll be able to do that next year. That's when your backs out of the backfield become a big part of the game.
Yeah.
And that's what Georgia did to Bama in the title game last year. It was hitting James Cook out of the backfield that kind of sparked that offense a little bit, right? That's when your number 2 tight end becomes a big part of the game because you hit that 35-yard seam route down the middle to spark your offense to say, hey, maybe we can't get away with this anymore. You know what I mean? Because we're so focused over here that we didn't account for Jaden Thomas up the slot because we could take our outside guys away, but we couldn't defend Jaden Thomas and Mitchell Evans and Holden Stace and the backside of the backfield and all these other type of things, right? And that's why those pieces are so important. That's what you need to win a championship. If you're not going to have the most talented team on the field, and Notre Dame is not going to put the most talented team on the field top to bottom against Georgia and Alabama, they're just not.
It's not going to happen.
You've got to have those complementary weapons that can be neutralizers, and then protect the best parts of what you do. Because in those big games, those great teams were able to neutralize the Notre Dame offensive line to a degree because Notre Dame wasn't balanced enough and didn't have enough weapons throughout to say, okay, you want to do this, we're going to make you pay for it.
Yeah.
And that, to me, is what happened in the bowl game. Now, it's not Georgia and Alabama. We're just talking about South Carolina. But Notre Dame also didn't have their full complement of weapons either to a degree in that game. But what happened is South Carolina said early, you're not going to run the ball on us. And so Notre Dame said, okay, we're going to beat you other ways. Well, Tyler was missing some of those throws early. But once he started hitting those throws, and South Carolina was like, crap. That little slide route to Logan Diggs. Why? Because they were playing the run.
Yeah.
And so they got sucked inside because they were playing the run. And that allowed Logan to get outside. Bam, 75-yard touchdown. You don't get that kind of leverage if a team is playing you spread out. So then South Carolina started to spread out more because Notre Dame was killing them in the flats and on the perimeter stuff. Then what happened? Started running it right down their freaking throat. You know what I mean? Because you can't stop both.
No.
You got to pick one.
No.
And that's what happened. So, and that's why JT was getting open behind them, behind the linebackers, because they were coming down. They saw play action. They were coming down.
Yeah.
And Notre Dame couldn't do that in a lot of games. They couldn't do that in the regular season. If you stop the run, it's like, well.
And that's why Notre Dame fans that go back to certain games and say, well, the offensive line didn't do this. The offensive line didn't do that. Look, you have to give your offensive line an opportunity to make an imprint on a football game. It's very rare that an offensive line is going to walk in against a credible opponent and just dominate from the first snap. That's not the way college football goes. Like if you play Alabama, Georgia in the playoffs or in Ohio State is going to come into Notre Dame Stadium. Notre Dame's offensive line isn't about to just dominate them from the first snap. They're not. The game has to get a flow. And then you have to allow your offensive line to say, hey, now that's not to say that the offensive line from the first snap can't pick up pass pro, can't give time to Sam Hartman. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm talking about when the game gets to a point where you flat out realize like, oh, they're dominating the trenches. Like they're dominating. Now they're pushing these guys around. You have to give your offensive line an opportunity to do that. And I think against USC, I don't think the offensive line got the opportunity to do that. If they don't make the mistakes that they made and they stay close to USC and they get it late in the third, late in the fourth quarter, the offensive line has an opportunity to do that. You saw there the last two drive, that last drive that ultimately led to the pick six. That drive, South Carolina was done. Like it was over. Just go watch that drive. Physically, you had linebackers not even trying to get off blocks. They were just.
That's what happened on the next drive.
Yeah.
After the pick, to your point, it's like you guys caught a break because we threw that pick six. That's on us.
Right.
We're going to come right
back.
And I loved that drive too, because it was just like, we're coming right back at you.
Yeah.
We're coming right back at you because we know we had you on the ropes and we gave you oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
We're strangling you out again. All right. We're choking you out again. We're coming right back at you. And then that first run was like, bam, bam.
Yeah.
Bam.
Yeah.
You know,
and it was the physicality. We talk about this. I think we talked about this. The play before the game winning touchdown. They're down there and they try to run the ball to Aldrich Estime. And there are like 5 South Carolina defensive players in the backfield. And they're just too tired to get them down. And Aldrich just works his way from a 3-yard loss into a 2-yard gain.
Yeah, that's a huge play.
That's a huge play, which gives Tommy the ability to call the next play, right?
Which was the little slide to Tyree, correct?
No, the next play was the actual touchdown to Bauman coming across. It was going to be
the Tyree was before that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it was going to be third and like.
Oh, that's right. It's going to be like 3rd and 13.
Yeah.
And instead it was like
third
12,
and 7,
and then it's 3rd and 7.
Right. So
where
now
play action works then.
Absolutely.
3rd and 3, that play doesn't. Third and 13, that play
doesn't work.
Great point.
But that play is Aldrich Estime, but that play is also South Carolina's defenders having no legs, being able to be drugged 3-4 yards to give Tommy the opportunity to call that play. So physicality can show up. The run game can show up in many different ways. No one would look at that run and say, "Oh, that run mattered," until you go back and look at what it could have been and what it ended up being and how it allowed Tommy the opportunity to call the game-winning play. So that's why you throw the body blows in the running game.
Well, let's talk about this too, Sean, to wrap it up, because we'll get to the quarterback stuff next. But that's why it's so important to have a multiplicity of weapons, right? And I'm not sure if I properly use multiplicity there, but it's important to have a lot of weapons, because you and I made predictions for next season at receiver. Breakout players.
Yeah.
You predicted Lorenzo. I predicted Deion Colsey. Tobias is a guy that other people might have predicted. Do you know how many catches those kids made in the bowl game combined? The 3 of those kids?
5?
0.
Really?
They didn't catch a pass between the 3 of them. Braden caught 4, Logan caught 2, Jaden caught 5, Mitchell caught 3, Tyree caught 4, and
Deion caught a pass. Maybe you're right.
They threw a couple deep ones to him, but he never caught one. And then missed. Tyler missed. Tobias was open in the end zone on that first touchdown drive.
Right.
And he just missed him.
He just missed him. Yeah.
Right.
And that's what Tobias ended up getting hurt.
Correct.
On that particular play.
He didn't have any burst afterwards. But
and then
the point is this.
Pass, to Tobias.
They scored 45 points and had 558 yards. And your 3 most talented receivers, just physical athleticism, caught 0 passes in that game. But Braden stepped up. Jaden stepped up. The backs out of the backfield. Mitchell Evans. And that's the whole point is when you have a lot of weapons, it's like, look, you can't take these guys out of the game.
No, you can't.
Because there's always somebody else there to step up.
Right.
And that's what can make it fun. That's what can make it really fun.
Yeah.
So that's going to end part 2 of our show today. That was a fun discussion, Sean. It went a lot longer than I expected, but it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that. We're going to get to the college football aspect next. But before we do, folks, please do us a solid and hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast. Make sure you give us a 5-star review. We would greatly appreciate that if you could do that. Sign up for make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel and the CFB Nation YouTube channel, and make sure that you are also signed up to the message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. We have a link to our newsletter, I believe, in the description below. We send those out almost daily. Where you can get all the top content from our Irish Breakdown site, which is all free content. So you'll definitely need to check that out. I'm not going to put some premium article in the newsletter and make you have to sign up for something. It's just get it right in your inbox. You can read all the best content that we had from the day before. It's time for the college football portion of our show, Sean. And we're going to talk quarterbacks. And we're going to talk about who we kind of predict to be the top 5 quarterbacks in the country next year. And then some guys to keep an eye on, some names to watch going into next season. And so, Sean, it really came from, we got asked a question yesterday in our Friday mailbag about who we thought would be the 5 quarterbacks next year. And it was kind of like, we can name 3, but then it's like, who's coming back and who's transferring? There's a lot of quarterbacks transferring this offseason. Mm-hmm. And so it creates a lot of conversation about who's going to be the guy this year. So we decided we are going to do something fun here. And before we get to our mailbag, and we're going to talk about who we think just kind of, it's that way too early top 25 type of thing, right? Which we'll be doing here soon at Irish Breakdown. And so you look at it and say, okay, I think there's 3 that are givens, right? There's Caleb Williams from USC. It's a given. Drake May from North Carolina. That's a given. The only question I have is where to put Drake, because I want to see how that system goes this season, Vince. Sean, you and Vince don't look alike. Sean, and because there's not the Phil Longo offense anymore. What does it look like? Are they going to put as much? I mean, because his numbers could go down, but his efficiency and his overall play could go up. You know what I mean? Where people are going to look, so he didn't throw for 4,000 yards like last year or whatever, but he's a better quarterback, more impactful quarterback. I don't know what their offense is going to look like. And then number 3, I think we both agree on, is Michael Penix, who is not getting nearly enough conversation or enough oxygen in the quarterback room. Now, what we're talking about, Sean, is we're not talking about NFL draft. Right. I don't care about the NFL draft. We're not talking about that, because Hendon Hooker's not going to be a high NFL draft pick, but he was a heck of a college quarterback. We're talking about who the best quarterbacks in college football last year. Michael Penix threw for 4,641 yards, completed 65.3% of his passes, through 31 touchdowns and 8 picks. Yeah. He's in, and both of his top 2 receivers, who were both 1,000-yard guys last year, are coming back. So he's in that conversation too. Yeah. So let's talk about that next tier. Mm-hmm. And so we're both going to kind of pick 2 sort of the top 5. And then we've got actually, neither of us had the same next 2. Sort of. And you'll understand why when Sean gives us 5. Right. And then we've got, so we'll kind of get into it, Sean. So we got Caleb Williams, and that would be my order. Caleb Williams 1, Drake May 2, Michael Penix 3 would be my order. Yeah. And I would say that Drake May's closer to Caleb Evans than Michael Penix is to Drake May. Yeah. Because the one difference between those 3 is Caleb Williams and Drake May are not only weapons as passers, but they're weapons as runners. And Michael Penix is more of just a chain mover as a runner. I mean, he had like 92 yards rushing. I'm looking at his numbers. He had 92 yards rushing last year, 4 touchdowns. He's a scramble. If it's there, he's going to run and move the chains. He's going to pull it on a read zone and walk into the end zone, that kind of guy. He's not the weapon that those other guys are when you look at like Drake May and when you look at Caleb Williams, Sean. And I don't know if you see it the same way. I'm telling y'all what I think. I look at Drake May, and Drake May can go toe-to-toe numbers-wise with Michael Penix. He threw 38 touchdowns and 7 picks, 66.2% completion rate, and had 4,321 yards last year. Yeah. That's pretty darn good. And that's on the same, somewhat on the same wave as what Michael Penix did last year.
And I think Michael Penix had a better overall team.
Agree, especially wide receiver. North Carolina had good receivers, but Josh Downs wasn't healthy all year. Yeah. They both had an 8.4 yards per attempt completion rate, but here's the difference. Michael Penix, 92 yards rushing, 4 touchdowns. Drake May, 698 yards rushing and 7 touchdowns. He was a much more effective weapon there. And then obviously Caleb Williams last year threw for 4,537 yards, had a 66.6% completion rate, which is so fitting for a USC quarterback. Had 42 touchdowns and 5 picks. I don't think you got that one, Sean. And then you look at it too, 42 touchdowns, 5 picks, but then he had 382 yards rushing and 10 rushing touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
So that to me is what separates those two guys from Michael Penix.
Yeah.
Because if Michael Penix is off throwing the ball, your offense struggles.
Yeah.
The top two guys are off throwing the ball. Like Caleb Williams didn't rip Notre Dame up throwing the football, even without their top two corners or two of their top three corners being in the game. He did stuff with his legs. His legs killed Notre Dame. So he could still make it. We saw that with Drake May. He could still do things with his legs, even if the pass game wasn't working. If you make the pass game inefficient for Washington, Michael Penix isn't as much of a factor.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's why it's 1, 2, 3 for me. Let's go with your number 4 quarterback for next year, Sean.
Some people might think it's a cop-out, but my number 4 is an unknown.
That's what I kept saying, sort of.
And someone comes out of nowhere every year. Drake May came out of nowhere to become a first-round guy in the 2024 draft, probably number 1 overall pick, if not the number 2 overall pick. So could it be – I'll just throw some names. You mentioned, could it be J.J. McCarthy becoming that dude that now can evolve and allow the Michigan offense to take the next step? Could Joe Milton, who has a world of physical talent, now in his second year with Josh Heupel, being there with Hendon Hooker, getting the win against Clemson in the bowl game, does he put everything together with Josh Heupel in that offense, which that system can produce great quarterback play? Right? I thought what Pratt did against USC, right, in a different type of way. What does he do going back to Tulane? It's just a lot of different guys, youngsters coming up. Cade Klubnik, does he take a step, right? Kyle McCord, is he the next dude, right? If early on, we didn't know C.J. Stroud after 3 games would even be the starter at Ohio State.
Kyle McCord's thrown a lot more passes coming into this season than C.J. Stroud through. C.J. Stroud literally as a freshman threw 0 passes. Now he played. He had like a 50-yard touchdown run in a game. But he threw 0 passes as a freshman.
Yeah.
So in that offense, you can't, whether it's him or Devin Brown, you can't. And Devin Brown, I don't think threw any passes this year. Same amount of C.J. Stroud.
Yeah.
So it really doesn't matter. Whoever the Ohio State quarterback is going to put up numbers.
Yeah.
The question is, will they be impact numbers?
Yeah.
And that'll determine if they are that guy that you're referring to as that potential breakout guy.
Yeah. So I that's just an example of guys that I think can come up to that next level. It happens every year in college football. Someone's going to do that. And then 5th, I'm going to go ahead and finally throw some flowers at the feet of Bo Nix. Like, I tried to hold off, but he literally, after that devastating loss to Georgia in week 1, he literally anchored that program for Dan Lanning. And he played absolute, man, the matchup between him and Michael Penix Jr., I think in like week 11 last year was absolute. That was amazing, amazing football. And the only reason that Washington came away with the win is that their running game was able to support Michael Penix Jr. a little bit better than the Oregon run game was able to support Bo Nix that day. And then they still had a chance to win. So for me, Bo Nix. Sam Hartman came in at 6 on my list. He came in at number 6. And the reason he came in at number 6, because I don't think Sam Hartman is going to throw for as many yards as he did last year out of necessity.
So is it just a production thing for you then? This is kind of – okay.
This is a production
thing.
This is a production thing for me. Sam Hartman, to me, from a production standpoint, yards-wise, is going to take a step back. But I think he's going to take a step forward, touchdowns, and then I think his interceptions come back. So I think he becomes a much more efficient, better-looking quarterback, not only, on the field, but also in the eyes of scouts. But I just think some other guys are going to step up and put up some better stats. I think Joe Milton has the opportunity with the receivers. They lose one big wide receiver, but they have talent coming back. And just that Josh Heupel system, which is pretty much just big plays, all over the place. That's what they go for. He's going to have an opportunity with his arm.
Sure.
If he has improved, and I mean, looking at the way he played against Clemson,
Yeah, he was solid.
he's a much better quarterback than what he was. I can tell you that. So
Yeah.
if he takes the next step, I think he has an opportunity to put up some gaudy numbers. I think Jaden Daniels is going to play really good next year.
Yeah.
I really do. I really do. So he's definitely going to have a better offensive line.
He's got to be more consistent, but that
Mhm.
kind of comes with being in a system for a second year.
Yeah,
You know, you're going to have a better grasp of what they do, what the reads are, the players around you.
yeah.
I'm not going to lie. I think the Keyshawn Boutte going to the NFL is going to help Jaden Daniels in that offense.
Like, it's going to be a much
He was a
better
head
vibe.
case.
Yes.
He was a head case. I mean, it was just like he was that prima donna. He always had to try to make. He was never happy, and you know, and you and I both noticed Brian Kelly's team. Brian Kelly doesn't handle prima donnas very well.
No.
And that's not an insult. He just doesn't want them. And that's the kind of situation that can just completely create toxicity in your room.
Mhm.
There's going to be oxygen for the other receivers now. And I'm going to be honest with you, whoever the LSU quarterback is next year, if Jaden Daniels gets hurt or something like that early, I mean, that kid came off the bench and showed, I mean, he's got some skills too,
Yeah.
you know, so they're going Nussmeier, right? And so they're going to have production there no matter who plays. My only concern there is a lot of his production at times was sort of, I don't say hollow production. There were just some times where he put up yards, but they just couldn't put the ball in the end zone, so it really didn't matter what the yards were.
Yeah.
That's going to be something they're going to have to improve upon. But again, that's going into year 2 of the offense. I expect them to be better in that regard.
Yeah.
So I could see that. I could see that. And again, the other thing too is he provides some ability with your legs.
Mhm.
Where Jaden's got to get better is he's got to be more willing. And I don't know if you agree with this or not, Sean. He's got to be more willing, in my view, to use his arm more. And that's going to be the big thing for him, is there were some games where, boy, he looked really good throwing the football.
Yeah.
But then there was games where just like, dude, what? Like if we could see more of the Florida game
Yeah.
from him,
Mhm.
well, he's going to be top 5. I mean, because he's got ability.
Yeah.
You know, he ripped Florida apart. But then there's other games where he's either he was so bad against Auburn. You know, in Mississippi State, he wouldn't throw the ball down the field.
Fourth quarter against FSU.
Yeah.
When they got down big.
He was pretty good then. The rest of the game, he's pretty awful.
Right.
Wouldn't throw the ball down the field. He only threw the ball down the field because they had to. You know, so you look at those things, Sean, you're like, boy, if this kid could just be that guy more often, he's got a chance to be a pretty good player.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be that part. And that was an issue you had at Arizona State. But again, there's going to be level consistency next year. I don't think that Brian Kelly's made any changes at the positions that will matter to him. Quarterbacks coach, offensive coordinator, I believe is still Denbrock. I believe that hasn't changed.
Yeah.
And so we'll kind of see how that one goes. And then, so you said Bo Nix is your 5, and then there's an unknown at 4. Let me give you my 4.
Bo Nix. You know what I struggle with? You know who I struggle with? Because I haven't even mentioned him. I struggle with Jordan Travis.
Yeah.
I really did.
Well, let's go right there. Let's go right there, because I'm going to give you my 5, and then we'll talk about some other guys we like, because that right there, Sean, great segue, by the way, sir. This is why you're a pro. I love doing shows with you. That's my 4.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the thing is based on your criteria, Jordan Travis won't be in here because he's not going to put up monster numbers. You know, Hugo last year, he threw for 3,214 yards, 64% completion rate, 24 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, rushed for 417 yards and 7 touchdowns. Those aren't like knock your socks off numbers.
No.
But here's the thing for me. He was big in big games. Even some of the games they lost, I thought, other than NC State, he played well. He played really well against Wake Forest.
Yeah.
He played really well against Clemson. He didn't play well against NC State. But a lot of quarterbacks didn't play well against NC State last year, if we're going to be honest about it. So to me, it's one of those things, Sean, where I look at him and I say, the reason he's in my top 5 is because he's just such a playmaker. He is just a kid that you look at, Sean, and you're like, man, like this kid he just puts his team on his shoulders.
Yeah.
He makes the plays he needs to make. He's a winner. You know, he's going to take games over. And I actually thought last year, I thought the play calling at times limited him a little bit. I think they need to open it up. And I think that they will this year as they kind of bring a lot of guys back.
Yeah.
And the other thing too is his production was also hindered at times by the running game. So like you look at the Syracuse game, he ended up going 21 of 23 for 155 yards, 3 touchdowns, only averaged 6.7 per carry or per attempt. But if you look at it, he didn't play a lot in that game because they were all over Syracuse in that game. I mean, they wore Syracuse out. I mean, so a lot of that production was early. And so there were some games like that that kind of stunted his production a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And it was 24-0 at halftime. It was 38-3 or 24-3 at halftime, 38-3 at the end of the third quarter. And so, I mean, the backups threw 8 passes in that game, So I think he's just a winner. I think that their schedule set up nicely to where he's gonna be able to make some plays and get some big wins. And I have him as my number 4 going into the season. So that's but the stats aren't going to be this. I mean, you're going to look at his numbers and compare it to other guys. Like Brennan Armstrong's going to put up probably better numbers in that NC State offense with Robert and I, right? Because he's followed Robert and I to NC State. You may see some other guys, Spencer Rattler maybe puts up numbers. Bo Nix will have better numbers, like just pure raw numbers. Bo Nix will have much better numbers.
Yeah.
And I'm a lot higher on Bo Nix than you are, and you and Ryan are. But if I had to say, if I've got to go win, if I got to go beat Georgia, and you're going to ask me, who do I want a quarterback? I'm like, can I have anybody? No. I have 1 of 2 guys. You can have Jordan Travis or Bo Nix. Before you get the word Nix out of your mouth, I'm telling you I want Jordan Travis.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a knock on Bo Nix. I like Bo Nix. You know this. Because we would have some fun arguments. They weren't real, but they were like, we're after some shows, we would have a Bo Nix battle because I love getting Ryan riled up. He likes to tweak my nerves, and the way I tweak him up is every time Bo Nix plays well, I remind him how much he hates Bo Nix and how good Bo Nix is, and put some respect on Bo Nix's name just to have some fun, right? But I like Bo Nix as a player. I always thought the issue was more Auburn than it was Bo Nix, and we saw that this year. But if I got to go win a game against Georgia, and I can only have one of those 2, I'm taking Jordan Travis. And if I took Bo Nix, his numbers would probably be better. But Jordan Travis is going to make me more winning plays. And that's why Jordan Travis is in my top 5. Because I'm looking at more impact as opposed to just numbers for me personally.
Yeah. I've looked at it and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to do this because there's so many different ways you can do it. I just want to have one way that I'm looking at this. And I'm like, I'm going to look at this from a production standpoint. But it was hard to keep Jordan Travis out of the top 5.
Yeah.
It was hard. Yeah. It was hard because I remember watching this kid in Notre Dame Stadium down big, and he just kept coming. He just kept coming. I'm like, who is this dude? I'm like, knock him down, tackle him. And then he just kept coming. And that's what Florida State has, man. They have a battler at quarterback that makes winning plays.
And a lot of weapons coming back next year, man.
Absolutely.
A lot of weapons coming back.
Absolutely. I have one of my favorite freshman wide receivers coming in, Hakeem Williams, as well.
Oh, yeah. He's got some – I mean, they're going to have a tall – Hakeem Williams is going to be like their 3rd tallest receiver next year. He's like 6'3", 6'4".
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, they're going to be tall. Here's my number 5, Sean. And I broke it all down, and I wasn't sure if he'd be there yesterday when he had the conversation. But as I broke it all down, I'm taking the guy that's been the most productive quarterback in college football the last 2 years. That's returning. That's Sam Hartman. And it's a lot like what I said about Jordan Travis. I agree with you. He's not going to throw for 4,200 yards this next season like he did at Wake Forest in his healthy season. Mm-hmm. And had he played a full season this year, because again, he did not. Sam Hartman did not play a full slate this year. He missed the opener this season because of the medical issue. But he averaged 308 passing yards per game, and they played VMI in the opener. He probably gets close to 300 yards, which puts him at 4,000 again. He's not going to throw for that many yards, I don't think, this year, unless Notre Dame goes too deep into the playoff, right, and plays in the championship game. I just don't see it.
Right.
And so, but I do think he's going to be 3,500 plus. I do think he's going to be 30 touchdowns plus.
Yeah.
Total touchdowns. He may not. I mean, I think he's going to get to 30 passing, But I could see a scenario where he has 25 to 28 just because, we need some big play receivers to step up for Notre Dame, right?
Absolutely.
And so will they have those 60-yard touchdowns, or will they have a 50-yard touchdown or 50-yard pass that they get caught at the 8, right? Or tackled at the 8? Where the pass game kind of gets you into the red zone, but you're not the home run passing offense like a bunch. And then you're going to run it in, right? So I could see his touchdown numbers being down, but I'm just kind of projecting like 3,530.
Yeah.
And then, 4 to 5 rushing touchdowns, off some read zones type of things. And I could also see a scenario where his touchdowns are down because when they do get in the red zone, they bring in Tyler Buckner to be the package quarterback or something like that, right? So, but I think the completion percentage is going to jump up 2 to 3 percentage points, and I think the impact is going to be there. I think he's going to have some big games and big moments this year because they're going to need him to, and he's going to go toe to toe with Caleb Williams this year in Notre Dame Stadium. He's going to go toe to toe with Brennan Armstrong this year. He's going to go toe to toe with Riley Leonard this year, who's a guy that I like a lot at Duke.
He could be that unknown.
Yeah,
he could be one of those unknowns.
He could be.
Yeah.
My only concern is now he isn't an unknown anymore.
No.
And he doesn't have the weapons around him. Like, let's just say hypothetically, Riley Leonard would have jumped in the portal and come to Notre Dame. Dude, I'd be so fired up right now. I'd be as fired up as I am about Sam Hartman because he's a heck of a player and he'd have weapons around him, right? He's a really good football player. But, you look at it, he's going to have a lot of those, whoever the Ohio State quarterback is. But no matter who that is, that moment's going to be huge. And so when I look at this football team, Sean, and I look at Sam Hartman, if Notre Dame is as good as I think they're going to be this year, he's going to have big moments in big games. And you look at the quarterbacks he's going to be dueling with this year, another Phil Dracovic battle.
Yeah.
It's, Cade Klubnik. There's going to be some of those big battles to kind of have his moment. And I think the receiving core fits him, what he likes to do well. He likes to throw the ball deep. He likes to throw it over the middle. He's going to be more of a pocket quarterback as opposed to that mesh that takes you to the line. He's going to have a run game that can protect him. I think the numbers, the efficiency is going to be through the roof is kind of how I see his numbers. I think, he's been I'm going to pull up his numbers here real quick. He was 8.6 yards per attempt this year. Just pretty good when you can, if you know that offense, that's pretty good. 8.6. Wake Forest ranked 12th in the nation this year in efficiency, passing efficiency. Yards per attempt. I think at Notre Dame with that run game, I think he's going to be up in around 9. I really do.
Yeah.
And so that's why and 9 would get you like in the top 5. So when I look at it, Sean, that's kind of why I feel like he's going to be in my top 5. Now, it was not easy, but it's just, there's just so many different question marks with so many of the other quarterbacks coming back that's really, really what kind of did it in for me. The other part of it too is we saw this Notre Dame offense, because here's the thing you could say, well, yeah, you may, what makes you think that being in this offense is going to allow them to be more efficient? Well, it's just what we've seen from this offense.
Yeah.
When Jack Cohn had time to throw last year, this was Notre Dame's yards per attempt in games where I felt Jack Cohn got time to throw for the most part. 10.5 yards per attempt against Florida State, 8.8 against Toledo, 8.8 against North Carolina, 9.3 against Navy, 11.6 against Georgia Tech, and 9.5 against Stanford. That was Jack Cohn, right? And so, we're going to see a lot more of those type of games, in my opinion, this year. And Notre Dame's not a huge RPO screen team, which can drag down that yards per attempt a little bit. It's going to be more, 65 to 67% with hitting some balls down the field, hitting balls over the middle, hitting more crossers, overs, things like that. Wheels, things that Tom Reese likes to do. And when they do hit the backs, they're going to go for more yards per catch than you normally expect. So those are the reasons that I have Sam Hartman in my top 5, Sean. Yeah. What are your thoughts?
No, I understand. He was at 6 for me. And the only reason he got bumped down to 6 is because I just went at the history of college football, and there's always one guy, one unknown that just jumps up into the top 5 that you didn't expect. And it's usually like a redshirt freshman or a guy that's been there for a year or two, and then all of a sudden, here he comes. It was C.J. Stroud, and then it was I mean, man, it was Bryce.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't play. All of a sudden, here he comes. So I don't see anybody on the depth chart for Alabama that can do that this year, in my opinion. So we'll see. Does Devin Leary, come back to form?
Right.
That's
At Kentucky.
at Kentucky.
And the expectation is that the guy that was the OC 2 years ago that kind of
Yeah.
allowed Will Levis to look good,
Hmm.
better than he is, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Another conversation for another day. Some team's going to regret drafting that guy in the top 5, Sean. I'm just telling you
Hmm.
that right now. But Liam Cohen, he's going to be coming back to Kentucky
Yeah.
as the OC. It's good OC. He's
Yeah.
gonna like Devin Leary. The question I have about him, to your point, is what kind of weapons is he going to have around him?
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, he was in the top 5 for us last year.
Absolutely.
I mean,
Absolutely. So, I
yeah,
mean, and a lot of people wanted him to come to Notre Dame in the
yeah,
portal when
right,
he went to the portal. So he's a guy. You mentioned Brendan Armstrong. Like, we know what he did at Virginia before he got injured.
right,
Does he come back to form
yeah.
at North Carolina State? It's just
He's
a
going to put up
lot of,
numbers. Like,
yeah.
he's going to put up numbers. I'm not a huge Brendan Armstrong fan. I think he's a system guy that puts up numbers because of the offense and the players around him. I don't think he's a take a game over. Holy crap, this guy carries a team. But he's going to
Hmm.
put up. We've seen him in that offense. He's got the
Yeah.
same guy running that offense at NC State this year that he had 2 years ago at Virginia. So he's going to put up numbers, in my opinion. And he doesn't strike me as a kid who's will have lost confidence because how bad things were at NC State this past year, in my
No,
opinion, either, Sean.
no. So, man, I think just at that, I think he was on track to do this before he got injured with the concussion. I think Dylan Gabriel was going to put up numbers at
You
Oklahoma.
know,
Like, his first 2, 3 games were really good. I remember the game he had, the first half he had against Nebraska was just ridiculous. And then he comes back and he gets hurt against Texas. But with that offense and playing in the Pac-12, I can see Dylan Gabriel being productive. I'm not
yeah.
saying he would be in my top 5, but I can see him having a really productive season. I think the quarterback that's coming back for Kansas State, not a pure pocket quarterback, but he's a tough
Will
Jordan
Howard
Travis like
come out?
Will. Yeah,
Yeah.
he makes winning plays. I think he's going to have a really good season. So,
Well, and then there's some of the transfers, Sean.
yeah.
That's the other thing. And I did want to point this out about Sam Hartman. So Notre Dame's running backs last year averaged 10.5 yards per reception. Wake Forest averaged 8.1. So again, that's the thing is Notre Dame's running backs provide a lot more big play ability out of the backfield.
Mm-hmm.
And all 3 of them had long receptions this year. Logan had one. We saw that in the bowl game.
Yeah.
Audric had a few, like 30-plus yard, and then, of course, Tyree. So what's funny is Tyree had the lowest yards per catch of the group. That was because of the 75-yard in the bowl game. You take that out, and then Logan's the lowest there. But still, but that's what you're going to get from that group.
Mm-hmm.
The portal kids are what really fascinate me because who of that hits? I mean, you've got Spencer Sanders going to Ole Miss.
Ole Miss.
How does he take the Lane's offense? They had a ton of portal kids show up. Phil Jurkovec, does he bounce back playing with the OC that he had at BC?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because he's going to have the OC back that he was really successful with at Boston College. Is he healthy? Is his head straight? I don't know. Devin Leary, you mentioned. Brendan Armstrong, you mentioned. Graham Mertz. Was Graham Mertz just a talented kid that? No. Let me make my points. With Graham Mertz, he's got a big arm, but was the issue Wisconsin or is the issue Graham Mertz? Some people argue it's the offense. I personally think it's both. You know what I mean? But now he gets his chance, right? You look at other guys, DJ Uiagalelei at Oregon State. I think that's going to be good for him. You look at Tanner Mordecai going to Wisconsin, running Phil Longo's offense. How does that going to work better than I think it's going to work? So there's going to be there's going to be a lot of quarterbacks that have played a lot of football in college football this year. And a lot of guys putting up numbers in some of these offenses. Who emerges as the game winners, the guys that can really be the money players is the way to put it, right? Who are the guys that are just they're just pump up the stats, right? They're just stat sheet guys, and who are the guys that are winners? That's going to be the interesting thing about this year, Sean, is who that, and we, Spencer Rattler, you mentioned Michael Pratt. I know people that like the Tungavaloa kid at Maryland. They think he's a really good player. He's going to have some weapons. There's going to be a lot of JJ McCarthy you mentioned earlier. There's going to be a lot of potential. There's a lot of guys that could jump into that unknown one for you, Sean. And I think that's where Sean's coming from, is that, like, who of that group who is the redshirt freshman that we didn't see much of that's going to be the next Drake May? Does Dante Moore jump into this top 15 quarterback conversation if he's able to step into the lineup right away at UCLA?
He could.
Right? Here's another one that's going to be very interesting to discuss. Does the presence of Arch Manning ruin Quinn Ewers or finally bring out the best in Quinn Ewers? Right? Does he answer? Does he respond to that challenge of Arch in year 2 in the offense with, okay, I'm ready to take this thing over now? Or does he kind of do what a lot of people think he's going to do, which is kind of fold and not be good? I think Quinn Ewers went from way overhyped to now being dogged too much. And what I mean by that is he was a freshman last year. Let's be honest about that. Yes, I know he spent a year at Ohio State. He didn't play at all, and that was supposed to be his senior year of high school. He was really a freshman last year. There were some other issues going on, some receivers that didn't always have their heads on straight, and some tough losses. And I think the kid kind of just didn't play as well as people thought. But I think that's because people had too high expectations for what he was supposed to be last year. If Quinn Ewers was a 3-star kid that nobody ever heard of, and he did exactly what he did last year, we're saying, hey, this kid had a pretty good rookie year. I want to see what he can do next year, right? But because he was the greatest quarterback ever and the highest grade ever by 247, which was asinine, because how could anyone watch freaking Trevor Lawrence in 2018 and think this kid deserved a higher grade than Trevor Lawrence did? That's stupid, right? But that's the hype that was put on this kid, right? And then he kind of brought some of that on himself with the whole decision to, graduate early to go to Ohio State so he could take the NIL deal and then transfer to Texas right away. We all saw that coming. Everybody in the world knew he's going to go to Ohio State, get his money, and then leave. Everybody knew that. So he's brought some of this on himself. Does he grow up or not? Does he answer the test that Arch is going to give him or not? Because here's the thing that we can both agree on, Sean. That kid has one of the biggest arms in college football. I mean, he's got a Josh Allen type arm, in my opinion. Just power, effortless. The question for me is, this is $1 million arm. What is this and what is this? That's the question that I have.
That's the question, yeah.
And if these things get answered, then all of a sudden he becomes a guy that's going to put up a lot of numbers in that offense.
Yeah.
But I'm not putting money on him going one way or the other, Sean. It's an unknown. But that's what fascinates me about quarterback play in college football this year. The transfers, the young kids that could break out, who, like you said, who's going to be the Drake May? Who's going to be the Devin Leary, the guy that's been injured a bunch that breaks out like Devin Leary did in 2021? You know what I mean? Sorry, Sean. Go ahead.
No, we haven't even mentioned Drew Aller.
Or Cade Klubnik.
Or Cade Klubnik.
Or Cade Klubnik. Could they be the Drake May? That's a great point, Sean, because Drew Aller's going to have some talent around him. Cade Klubnik, I think, is going to be a good player.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Offensive line, running game. Won't have everything on his shoulders.
Right. Oh, that running game is going to be legit next year, especially with the left tackle coming back.
Yeah.
We're talking about Penn State, right? Is that what we're talking about? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When that kid announced he was coming back, like, okay, Penn State's going to be decent next year. You know what I mean? Like on offense. So yeah, it really is. And like you said, Sean, there's kids who didn't start this year that are going to be that guy next year.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be fun. Here's a kid that a lot of people may not want to talk about. Connor Wegman at Texas A&M.
That's a good call. Looked pretty good at the end of the year.
Well, I loved him coming out of high school. He was my, I think, number 3 quarterback in that class, 2 or 3 quarterback in that class. I loved that kid. The question the thing is, I didn't think the fit made sense for him to go to Texas A&M at the time, because I'm like, Jimbo Jimbo is notorious for taking athletic quarterbacks and trying to turn them into pocket passers because that's all he knows. I never thought that the kid he had before was like a great player, right? I was never one of those people that was kind of, I wasn't one of those Kellen Mond is a great talent people. But I also knew that Kellen Mond was never used the way he should have been used. Now, I'm not saying he's not a guy that can throw the football, but you tried to turn him into a pocket passer because that's who Jimbo is. Bobby Petrino showed the whole world that he can take a run-throw kid and turn him into a pretty darn good player. Because one of the things about Lamar Jackson that people did not – I've said this, they don't give him enough credit for in college. Lamar Jackson put up some really good numbers as a passer under Bobby Petrino. So let's not forget, Bobby Petrino has developed a Heisman Trophy quarterback in recent seasons. And Lamar threw for over 7,000 yards in his 2 years as a starter, Sean. Or his 2 non-freshman years as a starter. His sophomore and junior season, he threw for over 7,000 yards and almost 60 touchdowns, despite being a guy that made a lot of plays. Now, Connor Wegman is not Lamar Jackson. The point is this, however, he has shown he can take a guy that's got ability as a passer and use that while also saying, but this kid can do some stuff with his legs, and we're going to use that too. That's something that Jimbo has never been able to do, ever been able to do. He's always like, this is what I know, and this is what I'm going to do. Right? That was my only criticism I ever had of Steve Spurrier, is Steve Spurrier could only coach one type of quarterback. And they were all going to have the same throwing motion. They were going to hold the ball back here. They were going to have the same throwing motion. He wanted cookie cutters at quarterback. And that's Jimbo. Well, Jimbo ain't Steve Spurrier. You know what I'm saying? Steve can get away with that because he's Steve Spurrier.
Yeah.
Jimbo's not Steve Spurrier. Bobby Petrino, if allowed to run his offense, is going to get production out of Connor Wegman. Now, is it this year or is it next year? I have a feeling we may be talking about him next year.
Yeah.
But I'm not sleeping on him for this year either, Sean. And so I'm telling you, man, I'm excited. And we didn't talk about Will Rogers because he's a system guy. I mean, that's that, like, that. Oh, Ryan brought up a guy yesterday too, is Cameron Ward, the kid, the transfer. He's coming back next year for a 5th year. That's another guy. So that Ryan thinks is going to make a jump, and I'm got my eye on him, right? And so it's going to be interesting, man. It's going to be very interesting. This is going to be a fun year. I don't know how many of these guys are high NFL draft picks, but I don't care.
That's a good call by Ryan, because he reminds me of Jordan Travis when I mentioned him at Notre Dame Stadium. I watched him at the Coliseum when they were just USC was the better team, but he kept competing. He just kept coming at USC. So I like that call. I love kids like that.
Here's my thing about Cameron Ward, Ryan, or Sean, and where I like Ryan's.
I've been Vince and Ryan today.
I know, right? Well, one of your Sean's was Sean Stiers. You just didn't recognize it because it sounds the same. The thing about Cameron Ward too is why I don't buy into the hype of the FCS kids coming to Power 5, because these kids come for 1 year and the jump is too great.
Yeah.
You're going from a level where you can make throws you just can't make and we don't. That's what I said. Name me a quarterback that's gone either from the group of 5 level or the FCS level, has transferred to Division I team, a group of Power 5 team, and been a dude in year 1. And I still can't think of one. I know there's been one, but I can't think of one. Most of the transfers that have been impact players are guys that transferred from one Power 5 school to another Power 5 school. Here's the thing about Cameron Ward, though. He now has that year under his belt of getting caught up to the speed of the Pac-12. So now he goes into next year and he's not making that jump from everything happens faster, the windows are tighter and all that kind of stuff. And so you're going to start to see from that alone that jump in production.
Yeah.
In my opinion. So I think you're both onto something. I think that's where I think Cam Ward could be a guy that surprises people, because he did get that adjustment year out of a system.
Yeah.
Where a lot of those kids don't get that. So I thought it was very smart of him to come back for another year, because like you said, his numbers weren't bad, Sean. I mean, he threw for 3,200 yards and 23 touchdowns and 9 interceptions.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of they had to throw a lot of passes to get there. and it wasn't super efficient. But next year, it's going to look a lot better. And I think anyway.
Yeah.
So I could see that. It's going to be this is part of the reason I'm excited about college football this year, Sean, is there's a lot of quarterbacks that have a chance to be good, good players.
Yeah.
And I'm really looking forward to see how those guys break out.
Yeah.
I really am.
Especially with the last year of the 4-team college playoff.
Right.
There are so many questions.
Yeah.
Even at the big teams. Like, who's going to quarterback for Georgia? Who's going to quarterback for Alabama?
Sean, right there, this whole conversation, we did not mention who the starting quarterback will be for Georgia or Alabama.
Nope.
Because I don't know. One of them's going to step up and make plays, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who is it going to be?
Who is it going to be?
Right. Because there's not a lot of quarterback transfers left, right? The kid from Vanderbilt, I think, is still in the market, right? But he's not that guy.
Yeah, he's not that guy.
So
maybe somebody jumps in after the spring.
Right. But then that guy misses spring ball.
Yeah.
Right. And who would that be? It's not going to be an impact player that's going to, it's not going to be Michael Pratt. It's not going to be, you know what it'd have to be? It'd have to be somebody that transferred now that got beat out, or a guy that they thought was going to start that got beat out. Like let's just say, for example, I got no intel. This is just me making an example, because I'm just, Driscoll said that. All right. Let's just say hypothetically that Devin Brown beats out Kyle McCord.
Mm-hmm.
There's some schools that I'd be like, hey, give me Kyle McCord. You know what I mean? It could be a situation where after the spring, you've got other quarterbacks that could be in this conversation. So it's going to be really, and I'm trying to kind of go through who else got transfers this year, but there's going to be a lot of guys that are going to have chances to make that move. And so I'm excited. I'm telling y'all, I'm really excited to watch college football. I mean, I'm always excited to watch college football, right? But especially this year, because I just feel like quarterback play in college football this year is going to be a lot of fun. I really do. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So that's our quarterback conversation for today, everybody. We're going to jump to the mailbag here in a second, and we're just going to answer some of the super chats and a couple of other questions that have come our way. It's not going to be a very long mailbag, but we are going to try to, like I said, we do have some super chats. There's a couple other questions that I want to get into about that you all have brought up as well. So if you want to throw some super chats in there, you feel free, and we'll answer those, but we're not going to answer all of the questions that we got today. I just want to get to a few. But before we get to the mailbag, please do us a solid. Hit that like button, right? Hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and make sure that you are checking out our leave us a 5-star review. Make sure you're checking out our CFB Nation app or our podcast, which you can find on all your podcast platforms. Also, make sure that you are subscribing to our CFB Nation YouTube channel, which is now monetized. We'll start putting more and more videos on that as well. And as always, make sure you sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So we're going to jump into the mailbag now, and we've got some super chats that we're going to get into here. And Charlie Weiss's last belt, Lewis super chat. Thank you, Charlie, very, very much. He goes, I look forward to this year. Sam Hartman will target all the receivers, not just one or two guys. I hope the freshman receivers can make an impact. Have a good day, IB. I mean, I think that's the hope, right? And where does that hope come from? Where does that expectation come from? And it comes from what we saw at Wake Forest. I mean, look, Wake threw the ball a lot more. But one of the things I liked about Sam Hartman is he spread the ball around. I mean, there were 6 guys last year at Wake Forest that had 24 or more catches. There was no one guy that just got all of it, and then there's this huge drop off, right? Like you had AT Pairs 81 for 1,096, but then you had 47, 42, 39, 37, 24. You had 4 different guys catch 6 or more touchdown passes. You had 3 guys that caught 9 or more touchdown passes. And you had one receiver with 37 catches, another with 42, another with 47, and another one with 81. And then his tight ends last year caught 33 passes. His running backs last year caught not a ton, 11, 14, 15 passes. So he's going to spread that ball around, and that's what we saw from him in college. Now, it's a different offense, and you hope that it'll translate to Notre Dame, and you think that it'll translate to Notre Dame. But, of course, we've got to see it, and that's obviously going to be part of the package. But I think that's why a lot of people are excited about what Sam Hartman brings to the table. And I think if Tyler Buckner's the quarterback for whatever reason, I think we saw that from him in the bowl game too, that he's going to spread the ball around. He's going to read the defense and try to get the ball where it needs to get to. I mean, he hit at least 4 different players for big plays in that game. When I mean big plays, I'm not talking necessarily about yards, big plays, but I mean big plays. The touchdown pass to Braden Lindsey over the top. He had 2 huge throws to Jaden Thomas. You had the pass to Logan Diggs that went for 75 yards. And then you had, I know that Mitchell Evans had the touchdown pass, but that wasn't even the biggest play of the game for me. It was earlier in the game on Notre Dame's first touchdown drive when it was 3rd and 15, and he climbs the pocket, hits Mitchell up the seam, and Mitchell catches it and then makes a couple guys miss and gets the first down. He hit Chris Tyree with passes. He had Audric Estime with a pass. He really was able to spread the ball around. So whoever the quarterback is this year, I expect them to spread the ball around a lot more. We've got roasted Spanish chestnuts with a super chat. Thank you very much. Nothing to say. Keep it up. I love IB Crew Alberto. So, yeah, you're always mixing up your names. You mix it up on the board. You mix it up here, but we love it either way, Alberto. Thank you very, very much. That's our friend from Spain. We got a super chat here from Kirk D.A. Anderson Fitness. And Kirk says, great show. We have the best O-line coach, put O-line players in the NFL, and they perform well. Why don't we get the very best O-line high school players each year? What makes you think that they don't? I mean, here's the thing. They got guys that Harry Hiestand wanted, with the exception of Monroe Freeling. I'll be honest with you. Everybody at Notre Dame loved Samson Okunlola's talent, but I don't think they thought he was a fit. But when you look at who Notre Dame landed, they got the guys they wanted. And it's always been the case. They've never been a team that fills up with 5-star offensive linemen. If you think about it, during Harry's tenure, he only signed, I think, 2 guys that were ranked as 5 stars by a service. But the reality is they were not what people view as, had someone on the message board talking about a consensus 5-star guy. And if you're going to use that kind of analogy, a guy that just everybody thinks is a 5-star, Notre Dame didn't get any of those guys, if we're being honest about it. I mean, you look at Tommy Kramer. Tommy Kramer was the number 8 player in the country and was a 5-star by 247, but he's ranked number 41 in the country by Rivals, and he's ranked number 99 in the country by ESPN. So he was clearly not, and he had to jump up to get in there from ESPN. So he was clearly not a consensus 5-star kid. And Quentin Nelson, I think ESPN had outside of the top 100. So he was ranked as a 5-star by Rivals, who had him number 29, but he's ranked number 75 by 247 Sports and number 175 by ESPN. So even as Notre Dame, as you said, Notre Dame's putting out these highly ranked guys, or putting out all these NFL players and all this on the offensive line, but Harry Hiestand's never obsessed on landing the best offensive lineman in the country. He's focused on landing the guys that he wants, that he thinks is going to make him have the best offensive line in the country. And you see those tools and that upside. So, I mean, Ronnie Stanley was not a top 100 player coming out of high school. I don't think anybody had Ronnie Stanley coming as a top 100 player coming out of high school. I know that Liam Eichenberg was a top 100 guy by most, but Rivals had Liam Eichenberg in the 180s. He became a 2nd-round draft pick and an All-American. I know one outlet had Robert Hainsey in the top 100, but not all of them had him in the top 100. Ronnie Stanley, for example, was ranked the highest he was ranked was number 145 by 247. Sean, ESPN had him as a 3-star and the number 34 offensive tackle in the game. So, again, I don't, Aaron Banks, right, Sean? If I believe you and Ryan both told me this week, again, I don't watch really the NFL, but you and Ryan both told me that Aaron Banks was a dude for the 49ers this year.
Yeah.
Nobody had him as a top 100 recruit coming out of high school. The highest he was ranked was number 121 by Rivals. He was ranked 185 by 247 and 278 by ESPN. So again, who was that 5-star guy that they landed in the past? That guy didn't exist.
Yeah.
No, I don't think anybody had Mike McGlinchey in the top 100. I know one service, I think at the time, Scout was still in existence. And Scout might have had him in the top 100, but I don't think that they did. But some people didn't even have him as a 4-star for most of the time.
Yeah.
And then they eventually bumped him up. He was a number 131 by 247 Sports, but Rivals didn't have him in their top 250, and ESPN didn't have him in their top 300.
Yeah.
So I think offensive line, so let me address your question another way too, Kirk. I think offensive line is a position where is one of the ones where you see the most misses from the recruiting services, in my view. They have a lot of misses on the offensive line. And why is that? Because I don't think most people doing rankings really know how to evaluate offensive linemen very well. What they look for is that big, huge kid that just dominates at the high school level. And so, I look at some of the offensive linemen that have been busts over the years. There's these big kids. There was a kid that just transferred from LSU. That was a 5-star kid. He was just, squatty guard that just killed people in high school. And I'm like, this kid has the worst technique I've ever seen. And here's an example. I was having a conversation with a person who's involved in rankings and evaluations for one of the major services, guy that I like, guy that I respect, for the job that he does. But we're having a conversation about that big offensive lineman that went to Washington a couple years ago that Notre Dame was recruiting. And it's like, oh, this guy's so good, and he just dominates people. And I said, do me a favor. When you and I get off the phone, I want you to put on the film, and I want you to just go like this to the top of his body and just watch his feet and watch his lower body. What you're going to find is he's stiff, he has slow feet, and he can't bend. But he's a dominant high school football player. And so he was ranked really high, and everybody wanted him. I said, but watch the stuff that translates more. I don't care. He's 100 pounds bigger than those kids he's going against. It's not going to be true in college. Watch him bend, watch his knees, watch his ankles, watch his feet.
Mm-hmm.
And he did it, and he's like, oh my gosh, dude, I see what you're talking about. Like, yeah, this kid's going to struggle with speed and athleticism the next. I said, exactly. But a lot of people that evaluate rankings, they don't look at that. They look at this guy kills people. This guy destroys people on the offensive line and dominates people on the offensive line. And so that's why I think a lot of people miss. There's some guys ranked really, really high that I'm like, that guy's not what you think he is.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But they got the guys they wanted. Like Sean said, Sam Pendleton is not an elite football player. He is not a top 100 recruit or top 200 recruit, in my opinion. But he is a hairy, he-stand offensive lineman.
Mm-hmm.
Because you know who else wasn't a big-time recruit coming out of high school? Joe Alt. And this was pre-Harry, but the Notre Dame staff did a great job of identifying him and getting on him. Because I said this at the time. I was very hard on Jeff Quinn his entire career. Everybody knows that. But I said at the time when they got him, I said, look, this is not a plan B. This kid's got upside. That they're banking on the upside. This kid has if the light goes on and he can get the weight up, this kid's got skill. He's not going to be a really highly ranked guy because he's 240 and he's a tight end and all this kind of stuff. But man, this is the kind of kid that would, if Notre Dame didn't get on him, this is what he said. He'd have gone to like Iowa or Minnesota or Wisconsin, sat for a year or two. And next thing you know, like by year 3, he's like this all-American or all Big Ten player. And you're like, where did that guy come from? Well, he ended up doing that a lot faster. But the point was, who the heck knew about Joe Alt nationally, like when you look college football fans before this past year. Now, there were some sites, like I know 247 was very high on Joe Alt coming out there, but they had him in the hundreds, not in the top 100.
Yeah.
Right? So they didn't even see what he's become. I had him as a 4.5-star upside grade. I love the kid's upside. I undersold it because he's a 5-star. So I think that's the key, Kirk, and I get where you're coming from, and I think your question's very fair. I'm not hammering you for it at all, but it's more about when Harry Heason is the O-line, an O-line coach, he's not looking for the best. He's looking for guys that will be the best down the road. And sometimes those guys are going to be recognized by some as 5-stars, like Charles Jagasaw is a top 25 player in the country by on 3. To me, they're a lot closer than to proper than the others. But when they got Charles Jagasaw wasn't considered that. Some services have him outside of the top 100.
Yeah.
I mean, Rivals has him ranked 199. 247 has him 38. ESPN has him 66. He's a top guy, but he's not that guy, right? So I think that's kind of where I look at it and say that's what they're looking for. Is they're looking for guys that fit the system, have the demeanor Harry wants, but can be part of a great line, not necessarily an individually great lineman. But he's looking at projection, not what they are now. And I think a lot of the misses that happen in recruiting are because people focus too much on what a guy is now, and they see these big physical kids that crush people, and then they don't see that he has slow hands, they don't see that he has slow feet, they don't see that he's a waist bender, they don't notice that his lateral quickness is trash, right? They just see this guy destroys people. They look at the pancake, and that's fun. We've joked about how this Notre Dame offensive line class should have a deal with IHOP or something. for all the pancakes. But here's what this group also has: athleticism, lateral quickness, ability, projection. And that's what he's looking for.
Yeah. And we disagree with some of the offers at times. Right? We'll see an offer go out and we're
like Joe
really?
Otting. Joe Otting was that way. Before
Yeah.
I broke down the film, I was like, why are you offering this 3-star kid at Kansas?
Yeah.
What are you doing, dude? Like, you look at the dudes you have on the board and you
Right.
pop in the film, you're like, oh.
Exactly.
My bad.
And that's, for me, it goes back to what Kurt said right there in his question. I don't care that Alabama puts you in the first round. Line up Alabama's offensive lineman for the last 10 years and Notre Dame's in the NFL.
Right.
And tell me who's better.
Right. Although during Harry's tenure at Notre Dame, he put more guys in the first round than Alabama did.
On top of that, it's about building players, because everybody wants to play at the next level when they come to college. There might be some young men that just walk in and say, hey, I know I'm not getting to the next level. I'm taking full advantage of this education at Notre Dame.
Right.
But the vast majority of the guys walk in. Can you imagine? How does that even feel? Like, because if you're a dude in high school, like Jagasaw, since he's been a freshman, has been a dude. What is it? How do you go stand on the sideline for a full game after you've been a dude for 4 years? That just jumped in my mind.
You have faith in the dude that's leading you.
Yeah.
Like I've told this story before. Remember talking to Lee Meikenberg coming to high school, and he was telling me how, the pitch that Urban Meyer had trying to flip him from Notre Dame was, dude, you're going to come here, start as a freshman. And he's like, but I don't want to start as a freshman. I'm not going to be ready to start as a freshman. Where do you think that came from? If you know Lee Meikenberg, he's a very confident young man. He's not arrogant. He's not a braggart. But he's confident in himself.
Yeah.
But who convinced him that he wasn't ready as a freshman? It was Harry. Because Harry was like, you're going to redshirt. We're going to get you here. We're going to do this. And then here, like, Harry's got your whole career planned out.
Oh,
and so when kids don't play as freshmen, they're like, yeah, I get it. Okay. This is exactly what Coach Easton told me how it was going to go.
Yep.
And that's another reason why they don't get some of the more highly ranked guys, because those guys don't want to hear that. They don't hear him coming into play right now.
Yeah.
Now, Harry's not afraid to play a guy right away.
Right.
And I promise you, he never promised Robert Haynes he was going to play as a freshman. Never. It's just Robert came in and worked and was like, dude, I'm too good not to play. And Harry said, yeah, you're right. You are. And so we're going to play you. Right. We saw Steve Elmer play as a true freshman under Harry. Ronnie actually played a little bit as a true freshman, but then he got injured and got his red shirt back because they didn't have that rule at the time. But we've seen him do it when it's needed, or if a guy's just that good.
Yeah.
But but that's the thing, is they're not going to promise you, you're going to come in, you're going to do this. We promise you this, promise you that. Carrie's like, yeah, you come in and you trust me. I'm going to make you the best player you can be.
Yeah.
And it's going to shape out how it's going to shape out. And guys that want to hear that aren't going to come to their name. But again, if they don't want to hear that, then they're not a guy that's going to thrive under Harry Easton.
Absolutely.
And so it's important that he find those right fits, because if you don't get a guy that's willing to get yelled at and cussed at and all those type of things, and then you're not going to last here very long, nor will you last in the NFL, right? Because a lot of O-line coaches in the NFL are a lot like Harry Easton. And so so that's why. So it really is about finding the fit. So I hope I think it's a good question, because I mean, you often wonder about that, like why this dude produces O lineman like nobody's business. Why doesn't he get all the five? I mean, you'd think he'd get the number 1, the number 2, the number 3, the number 4, and the number 5 offensive lineman in the country, or some, bunch of top 10 guys, right? Like he's getting the Fab 5 of offensive line every year. But it's like, but that's not what he wants. It's not what he wants. He wants talented guys, but they got to fit certain things that he's looking for. Like little things like this. I remember one of the offensive linemen told me, he's like, he was so detailed that like one time a player brought a jacket, and it was not the specific like right jacket. It was some little thing, and he made the kid go back to his room and get the right jacket. Like it's just that level of attention to detail that he has. But it's like, but the players would be like, I don't understand why he's making a big deal about this. And then by the time they're fifth year seniors and seniors, like, oh yeah, I get it. Yeah. Because that manifests itself on the football field. Because Harry's one of those guys that you can't turn the switch on and off, Sean. You're
No.
either this way all the time or you're just never going to be the player you can be. And the results speak for themselves. So, I mean, that's why. But good question, Kirk. Because I mean, I promise you, Kirk, you're not the only person that has that question. Promise you that you're not the only person that has that question. We'll address this, Sean. Joe Medina with a super chat. Thank you, Joe. Says Justin Scott is visiting Notre Dame tomorrow. On a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you guys with Marcus Freeman sealing the deal with Scott? So real quick, as of it's been about an hour now, that visit is not 100% solidified. I saw people getting on 24/7 Sports for jumping the gun a little bit. That's not what happened here. Justin told them he was coming tomorrow. But talking to our sources, it's not 100% finalized yet. They expect it to, but when it's not finalized completely, things can happen. He may say, I'm coming, but then he talks to mom and dad, and they're like, no, we've got this function tomorrow that we've already committed to, so we can't come. Or there may be his basketball coach might say, no, we actually have practice tomorrow that we weren't scheduled. So things can always happen. So 24/7 did not jump the gun on this one. They reported what the kid told them. We're just saying it's not 100% certain, but I was told like 95% certain that it's going to happen. It's just not officially locked in, meaning like the time is set and the details and the particulars are all that set. But we do expect Justin Scott to be on campus tomorrow. It's just not. So when I said it's not locked in yet, some people are like, I hate it when 24/7 does that. And I get it because 24/7 does do that a lot. In this instance, however, I think it was Tom Loy, I think is the one that reported it, I believe. He wasn't jumping the gun. He was reporting what a kid told him that he was going to do. So we're just giving you a little bit more context of there's still some things to work out. I mean, by the time the show's over, it may have already been worked out, Sean. I don't know.
Yeah.
But we expect him to be on campus. So address that. And so then I'm going to ask you, Sean, because I don't know if there's anybody that is as tight, that knows Justin and the Chicago area as well as you do. So I'll kick the second part to you. On a scale of 1 to 10, because you also know my stance on this one. On a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you guys with Marcus Freeman sealing the deal with Scott?
I'm saying 9. I don't know if we're sealing the deal. I mean, ultimately getting him in the class, if that's sealing the deal, then I would say 9.
And I guess
I would say
when?
9.
Are you talking like this weekend, or are we talking about when he commits on
Yeah.
January
And
31st?
look, and I said this last week. Everybody went crazy when he took the tweet down. I'm like, do you really care if it's February the 31st, or February doesn't have that many days? If it's February 20th, if it's March 20th, you don't care when it happens. You just want it to happen, and that's the ultimate thing. Nothing's changed. I talked to him
Now,
last night. I talked to him.
Can you clarify that, Sean? Because a
Yeah.
lot of people are thinking that he's not going to do it on the 31st because he took the tweet down. He has never said he's not committing on the 31st.
No,
And I believe he said to you that his plans have not changed in that regard, correct?
When I spoke to him last night before his game, he said nothing's changed. He said Georgia does. It intrigues him. I mean, like, why wouldn't it intrigue him? Look at what they've done with interior defensive linemen over the last 4 or 5 years. It's intriguing, And I didn't even ask him why he took the tweet down. I just asked him what's going on, what's up with you, and he was like, "Look, everything's the same. Nothing's really changed, and I'm going through the same process. They gave me something to think about, and that's that. And from that, could he go public this weekend if indeed he shows up to campus? Sure. If because we've seen him react to things. We saw his reaction, in my opinion, to Marcus Freeman showing up at his school. Then Georgia shows up, and then you see something come from that, right? I could possibly see him getting blown away this weekend when he shows up and saying, "Man, you know what? Let's just do it now." You just never know. Why? Because he's a teenager.
Right.
Right. They react to things like that. So nothing is surprising with what's going on. I think I said when he decided to tweet that out, I was shocked because it wasn't what he had told me just days before with the
Day
process.
before.
Yeah,
The
with
day
the
before.
day before with the process that he wanted to, follow out. So we'll see. We'll see. I actually in talking to him, You know, he was cool, and I told him, I didn't want to press the issue. I talked to him before the game. I knew he had a game. I'll talk to him Tuesday. I'll be at the game Tuesday.
Right.
So
Well, and the other thing too, Sean, is what I'm being told from some of my sources is that he has not set up a visit to Georgia. It's not a given that he's going to visit Georgia.
that's why we never even said that.
That's why we didn't.
Yeah.
He also reported the next day he had an offer from, I think, Florida.
Florida.
I think
Yeah.
offered the next day.
Yeah.
Look, y'all got to understand. Y'all got to stop stalking these kids on social media, first of all, because it's like when Cooper Flanagan was reporting. Like, I've seen people freak out when Cooper Flanagan got offered by Alabama. I saw people freak out when Don Schuler got offered by Ohio State, and then they freaked out again when he got offered by Georgia, and then they freaked out again when he got offered by Alabama. By the way, that not top 200 safety, they got offered by Ohio State, Georgia, and Alabama. I just remind people of that, right? So you're telling me that rivals and knows more about a Don Schuler than Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, and Notre Dame. Okay, cool. Let's go with that. But that's the thing is these kids are gonna these kids, especially the respectful ones, who understand like there's a lot more kids than y'all realize that appreciate where they are right now.
Mm-hmm.
And the recruiting process can get hectic and get busy, but they are so thankful that these schools value them in a degree that a scholarship offer means the world to a lot of these kids.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're going to take your time to offer me a scholarship, the very least I can do is say, thank you for offering me a scholarship. And so you'd see all these Notre Dame kids get offers and then they would tweet thanks for the offer. And then people would panic as if like he's going to look at that school now. No, he's being respectful. He's being what a kid should be. And if Justin Scott gets offered by a school he hasn't been offered by 2 months after he commits to somebody, guess what? He's still probably going to tweet out, thanks for the offer. I really appreciate it. I'm humbled. I'm honored. Thank you for this.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's what a lot of kids should do. You know what I mean? And so I have no problem with that. I have no problem with that. So go ahead, Sean.
The one thing that I did say on last week is that he took that tweet down, but he didn't delete any of his interactions with Cam and CJ Carr when they were tweeting at him when he was putting up the clover and the shamrock. He didn't take those down. So if he had taken those down, then I would worry.
Sure.
Like we're flipping over an announcement date. Like, did he take it down to move the date up? Did he take it down to move it back? No one knows.
Right.
But at the end of the day, where we reported, where he was and where his mind was, is that he was very close and pretty much knew where he wanted to go.
Right.
That's what we reported on Irish Breakdown. And that was the day after Notre Dame showed up.
Right. I want to say something else too, Sean. If I was advising a recruit and he was going to tell me, hey, these schools are offering me, I'm not going to do anything. I say, listen, what happens if the school you're committed to's coach leaves? Or they don't make a promise to you, or something happens to where all of a sudden in 2 months, you're going to need those schools that you pissed off or you blew off or you didn't respect to want to love you again. Right? I mean, there's no need to burn those bridges if you're being smart, because you don't know what's going to happen. And so that's another reason why people just need to not look into too much of that stuff. Right? Like you said, maybe he took it down because he's going to do it sooner. Maybe he's going to do it later. Maybe he's still going to do it on that day. Mm-hmm. How about we actually let the kid tell people why he moved it before we freak out and assume it's because he's going to do something else? And that's all that I ask people is look, we don't need to lose our minds every time a kid puts something on social media. Like last night, the thing about CJ Carr, he put some video out where he is at University of Washington, putting on University of Washington gear. And people are just flipping out. Why is he doing this? He's at some camp. Well, he shouldn't be putting on that jersey and doing this, that, and the other thing. And I'm like, he's a teenager that a school is showing around along with all the other kids that are part of that camp at 7-on-7 and stuff. Like, why not? Right? Let these kids live their freaking lives without all of us saying what they should or shouldn't do when they're on a visit somewhere that's not even it's not even a visit. You know what I mean? So I just wish some of y'all would just kind of chill out. And then what they're going to do, Sean, is going to take the Peyton Bowen situation and then assume that every kid is that way. We've already seen it in the chat. Well, based on what happened with Keon Keeley, I'm not going to count. Justin Scott and Keelan Keeler are two completely different kids in two completely different parts of the country in two completely different situations with two completely different support systems. Right. And here's the thing they ignore. Notre Dame lost, 4 or 5 kids last year that they wanted to keep. They signed 24. There was a lot. They didn't. Drake Bone never wavered. He had big time schools coming after him. Jeremiah Love never wavered, despite what other people reported. I promise you, he never wavered. Jaden Greathouse never wavered. Braylon James never wavered. Right? Charles Jagasaw never wavered. Do you think schools stopped recruiting Charles Jagasaw?
No.
Heck no. Boubacar never wavered. Devin Houston never wavered. Brennan Vernon never wavered. Jaden Osbury never wavered. Drake Bowen never wavered. Christian Gray, LSU and Ohio State recruited him until the day he signed with Notre Dame. I promise you this, Sean. You know this. He never wavered. Adon Schuler got offered by Ohio State, Georgia, and Alabama after he committed to Notre Dame. Never wavered. Right? And so Micah Bell got offered by Georgia, the defending champs, who won another one, whose team his brother flipping plays for, offered him. And guess what? Thank you. I really appreciate that. He tweeted it out, never gave it a second thought. So let's stop assuming that every single kid is like Keon or Peyton, because those two even aren't the same, Sean. They're completely different situations.
Yeah.
And so just how about we assume this? Here's what we should assume. Every freaking kid is different. And we should always evolve and learn about the things that we get wrong and say, like, hey, look, we're going to follow the kids' actions more now than maybe we did in the past, where we'd take the kids at their word. Right? So until a kid gives us a reason not to assume that he's not wavering, don't assume that he's not going to. Life's too short, man. There's too many things going on in this world for us to be losing our minds and getting bent out of shape because a kid tweeted something that makes you nervous. It's like, how about we just give these kids the benefit out? And then if they do things that make us like, we should have had our antennas up we did have our antennas up. I mean, you guys have you guys know what the comments that I made to y'all throughout that process and all that. But we kept reporting, hey, look, this is what he says. What he says, we should have been more critical of the moves that Peyton Bowen made, for example.
Yeah.
And, instead of assuming that he was being honest, right? That's on us. Learn that. But unless Charles Jagasaw or unless Justin Scott starts doing that, let's not assume that he's like Peyton Bowen. Until he starts taking other visits after he commits somewhere, let's not assume he's like Keon Keeley. Let's assume he's Justin Scott. And then we'll go from there. That's the way I look at it, Sean. That's my rant for the day. So it can get a little frustrating at times. So let's get back to some more questions, Sean. I said earlier, but Joe, thank you for the super chat very, very much. I did say during the show that we're not going to do a ton of questions, but there's a few that we're going to get to here. And then Sean, you haven't talked to him. There was one question from Justin Carlson about, did you hear anything about how things went last night with the Notre Dame coaches at his game? I don't think you've talked to him since then, correct?
No, I didn't talk to him last night, nor have I talked to him this morning. I'm sure sometime over the weekend and then Tuesday night is when I'll chop it up with him. But yeah, he no. I would not come out, and even if he told me, I wouldn't sit up here and say, yo, this is what the coaches said, this is what they said. No. They were there to watch him play basketball.
And that's what they did.
That's what they did.
Here's a question that I got asked yesterday, Sean, and I gave my answer. I'm going to let you give yours. This is from Tyler Binge, mailbag team question. Last year, if the team won a national championship, some said they would give Brian Kelly credit for helping build the team. For 2023, how much, if any, credit to Brian Kelly? I'm at 10%. This year, it's more Coach Marcus Freeman's team. Sean, what would your answer be for that? And then I'll tell you what mine was.
He's gone, man. I mean, I'm just not really into the credit, right? My mom used to do a great job. My grandmother used to do a great job of taking the scraps left in the freezer and making a meal. And you felt like it was a 5-star restaurant. So it really doesn't matter what Marcus Freeman got that was left over. He's the chef. It's all about the chef. Like, No one. If Brian Kelly goes to the playoffs, I mean, he went to the SEC championship game. How much of that is Ed Orgeron for this year? So I personally don't get into giving percentages of credit and like, man, if you're the chef, you have to figure out a way to do what you do and fit the young men that are there into your plans, and that is a task. So,
Yeah.
I wouldn't give him any credit. That's just me.
I knew I liked you. I knew there's a reason I liked you. I wasn't sure what it was until just now.
I don't do that credit stuff.
Yeah. Somebody, I think Mr. 2.0 is trying to get us fired up. He just said he's joking, but he said, "How much credit does Brian Polian get? Can we do negatives? Can we do negatives on this one? Negative 12."
No, that's funny. That's hilarious. That's funny.
Oh, very well done, Mr. 2.0. Very, very well done. All right, let's get to another one, Sean. This is a comment that Joe Medina made that I loved. He said, a kid getting offers from top tier schools means he's pretty darn good. Isn't that something fans should want? That's the thing that's wild about people that just obsess over recruiting is they'll say in one breath, they'll say, well, this kid didn't get offered by so-and-so, so-and-so, and so-and-so, so he must not be that good. Mm-hmm. Then he commits to Notre Dame, and then he starts getting offers from all these schools, and then it's like panic sets in of like, oh, he's going to do this, he's going to do that. And it's like, how about you just let it play out a little bit? You know what I mean? But like, it's just like we talk about Don Shula got offered by all those schools after committing Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Some are going to take it. Some kids are going to get those offers and leave. Keon did that. Keon got offered by Alabama and Ohio State. And at the end of the day, they had a better shot to get him than Notre Dame did, who got on him much earlier. It's going to happen. It's going to happen if Notre Dame wins a championship. It's going to happen. And sometimes they're going to get those guys.
Yeah.
Right. And that's going to be the thing. Got a super chat here from Daniel Feller. Says, any updates on CJ Williams? Love y'all's show and all you do. Thank you, Daniel, for that very, very much. CJ committed, I think, last week, Sean, to Wisconsin. So I believe Wisconsin has started school this week as well. I believe. I could be wrong on that. So he is going to be going to Wisconsin. Notre Dame recruited him, but talking to my sources, really from the jump, I don't think they really pushed hard for him. And at first, they weren't even going to go after him at all.
Yeah.
And then they kind of started recruiting him. And there were some people that just weren't ever super comfortable with CJ because of how his decommitment went down. Like, I'll say this to you. I believe that if Peyton Bowen in a year from now decides he wants to transfer to Notre Dame, I think there's going to be a lot of people like, no thanks, pass. If Keon Keeley goes in the portal and calls Notre Dame and says, I want to come to Notre Dame, they as a group, top to bottom, say, yep, come on.
Yeah.
Because the situation was handled differently in a way that you can still respect the kid and love the kid and know that he's still a fit for you. And so his situation is a whole lot different than, I think, a Jaden Lamar, a Dylan Edwards, a Peyton Bowen. If Elijah Page wants to transfer to Notre Dame and you think he's a good enough player to play for you, the way he handled things, you'll take a look at him, right?
Yeah.
And that's how it'll be. Keon, you take him. And not just because he's a talent, because he handled it with a level of respect for Notre Dame and honesty with Notre Dame. And he didn't change his character and all this. He just decided he changed what mattered to him in the decision-making process, which we discussed yesterday. We need to get into it again. So you may not like his decision, but there's still a level of respect for him. I have no respect for Peyton Bowen. None. I'm not recruiting him or his brother at this point in time. But that's his unique situation. I'm not taking a Maureen Walker. I'm not. I might look at another kid that picked another school or decommitted a little more. It just depends on how they handle the situation. And there were just some people that just were not comfortable with how CJ did all that. What he said to their face and then what he kind of said to other people and just didn't feel like he was honest. And that's the thing is, like I tell all these kids, hey, 99.9% of coaches and recruits will understand if you got to change things and will respect you. They may not like it at the time, but they'll respect it.
Yeah.
If you're honest. But when you play these games and you say one thing and if I don't trust your word, what do you have?
Nothing. Nothing.
And so just be honest, and it's hard to preach that too much I can say that, but it's hard for coaches. Some coaches say that. That's why if you're a coach, don't get pissed when a kid lies to you when you lie to kids. Right?
Yeah. That's a good point.
But that's also something I feel about Marcus Freeman is I've never heard of a situation where they talked to a recruit and they were telling him one thing that they were telling us something different. I've yet to meet that situation so far. It's early yet, but so far I have not had that happen. So that was that question. Now, here's one from Brent Smith. Recruiting question in theory: using 25 players yearly, your class should have 2 5-stars, 24 stars, and 3 high-end 3-star developmental players. Do you believe this is realistic? If you're talking about what they become, yes. If you're talking about what they're ranked coming out of high school, I could not care less. Brent, you bring this up all the time.
Yeah.
And I get it. It matters to you. That's cool. But you're gonna get the same answer from me every time.
Yeah.
It's like I feel like you're expecting me to say something different. You need stars to win a championship. You need 5-star college football players to win a championship. 1,000%. You don't win a championship with a bunch of really good, fundamentally sound 3-star talents. You don't. As college football players. The issue that I have is that some people think that you are what you are based on your recruiting ranking. And that's the issue that I have. Michael Mayer was ranked as a 5-star and played like a 5-star. Isaiah Foskey was ranked as a 4-star who was not even a top 200 player, and he played like a 5-star.
Yeah.
Do you disagree with that at all, Sean? I mean,
no,
I don't.
Spot on.
Will Fuller was not a top 100 recruit by anybody, and ESPN ranked him as, I think, the lowest ranked player in the entire class for Notre Dame. The only kid they had ranked lower than him, I believe, in 2013 was a kicker.
Yeah.
A punter. But he played like a 5-star. Benjamin Morrison was in nobody's top 300 last year, except mine. But he played like a 5-star. So that's the key, right? Tommy Kramer was a 5-star recruit that played like a 4-star kid.
Yeah.
Right? And so where we will all agree, Brent, is that you can't win without a makeup somewhat like this, Sean, from a what they are in college standpoint.
Yeah.
The difference of agreement, Brent, that you and I have and will continue to have is that you assume too much that this, from a ranking standpoint, will be what they are. And I don't. There's 2 types of 5-star linebackers. There's the Jalen Smiths, and then there's the Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoahs. The ranking profile was very different. Jalen was a 5-star, and we all knew he was a 5-star, and he was a 5-star by his sophomore year. For Jeremiah, he needed more time, different type of player, right? But at the end of the day, Jeremiah's production over 2 years was even better than Jalen's over 2 years. Part of that scheme. But they were both elite Butkus Award-winning 5-star college football players.
Yeah.
And that's what I care about.
Yeah.
Notre Dame is going to have arguably the best cornerback tandem in the country next year. One of the kids ranked in the 300s, one of the kids ranked in the 600s. North Carolina had a 5-star cornerback last year. Would any of you trade any of Notre Dame's corners for anybody in the secondary at North Carolina?
No.
I wouldn't.
No. And then you have to change the narrative.
Right.
Like Benjamin Morrison, no, I'm just saying this because I saw it in the chat. Benjamin Morrison wasn't an overachiever.
No.
He was exactly who we thought he was.
5-star upside. I mean, he just got there sooner.
And I think that's the problem with stars is that, you kind of give false narratives at the beginning when everything should be a blank canvas for these young men as they come into college. Like, let's see what they're able to paint with their careers. And like you said, Benjamin Morrison's just happened a little bit earlier.
Right. But what he was this year, Sean, was what we always thought he was going to be at some point in time in his career at Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
Like, look, y'all, in this channel, anyone that's been here for a long time, if you're new here, go back and listen to some of the shows we did on Benjamin Morrison last year. Sean, I've been saying from day one that he was going to be this guy. And how much pushback did you give me? None. Right? So somebody said Sauce Gardner he wasn't even in the top 1,000.
Right.
Stetson Bennett was not a top 1,000 player. Ladd McConkey was not a top 1,000 player. Right? They were champions, though. Starters and champions at key positions for them.
Yeah.
Jordan Davis was not a top 100 player. I think Jordan Davis was a 3-star. Jalen Carter was a 5-star.
Yeah.
Both great players in college. They both played like 5 stars. Jamar Chase, somebody just brought this one up. Jamar Chase was a 5-star recruit, I believe, coming out of high school. I mean, you knew what he would be, right? He was a dude. And what's the Justin Jefferson was not.
No.
Right? And so I'm actually going to look up Jamar Chase's ranking because I believe he was a 5-star. I know he was a top 100 guy. Let me just look and see if he was definitely a 5-star for sure. But I believe he was, Sean. He was top 100. 247 ranked him as a 5-star. But here's another reason why rankings don't matter to me. 247 at Jamar Chase is a 5-star player, the number 19 player in the country. Sounds about right, correct?
Yeah.
ESPN had him ranked number 42 at receiver in his class. They had Jamar Chase as the number 42 wide receiver in the country. Right? So, but here's my point. Justin Jefferson was not even in the top 2,000. Both great players, right? Both 5-stars in college, both first-round draft picks, both dudes in the NFL, correct? I mean, I just look at stats. So I watch, but when I watched Jamar in the playoffs last year, because I do watch playoffs, he's a 5-star. Justin Jefferson's putting up numbers. Didn't he lead the league in catches this year, I believe? Something like that.
Yeah.
Got there completely different ways. But in college, they were 5-star players. And that's the key. They got it. Brent, you are spot on, dude. You are so correct, and you're correct every single time. If you would change the narrative to what they are in college, we'd be on the same page.
Yeah.
Because 2 a year gets you like 8 stars over the course of a 4-year period. That's about right for me. Now, the key is, Sean, there's got to be some spreading out of what those elite players are. If over the course of 4 years you get 8 5-stars and they're all offensive linemen, you're going to be pretty good at certain parts, but you may not be good at others. Right. What I like about what Marcus Freeman is doing, he's starting to bring in more 5-star upside guys at corner, at running back, at receiver, at linebacker, at, you know what I mean? Like, other than safety, we're seeing him bring in those type of guys at not just offensive line and tight end. And you know what I mean? Like, we're starting to see it spread out to positions where they weren't getting that kind of guy.
Yeah.
Year after year after year.
Right.
And I think that's important. So Brent, if we could just change the conversation to those, you need those type of players to be part of your class for what they turn into, then spot on with you. Same page, buddy. But if you're going to continue to insist that they have to be that as high school recruits, I just can't get there with you. You know, because some 5-stars are going to be like Justin Scott, Sean. Yep, that's a dude. We know he's a dude. But other 5-stars are going to be a little different.
A little different.
Right? Like, there's this cat that plays for the St. Louis Rams, or the Los Angeles Rams now, right?
Yeah.
You know, pretty darn good player in college, pretty highly ranked draft player. You might know who I'm talking about, Sean. Have you ever heard of this guy named Aaron Donald? You ever heard of him?
I have.
Okay.
My most embarrassing projection in draft history, but
what'd you say? You thought he was going to be a bust?
I saw him play Notre Dame, and I saw Zach Martin have a pretty good night against him, and I was like,
Ronnie Stanley and Steve Elmer put in work on Aaron Donald in that game, and Zach Martin got him too. Yes,
and I came away from that game like, oh, he's trash. Like, what are they talking about?
Right.
Yes, that's we
all have those misses. We all have those misses.
I based it on one game.
Correct.
Against a pretty good.
That was a fan reaction, not you broke down film. You're an NFL draft analyst. Yeah, exactly. But the point is, Sean, do you know what his grade was on 247 Sports? They didn't even think he was good enough to rank. Actually, that's unfair because I think that was a year before they started. Rivals ranked him as a 3-star recruit and the number 37 player in the defensive lineman in the country. Mm-hmm. ESPN ranked him as a 3-star player and the number 22 interior defensive lineman in the country. He ended up being a great player, right?
Yeah.
So you can get there in different ways, but the point is you need someone to become him in college. I don't care if it's a 3-star kid that everybody overlooked or a 5-star kid day one. The point is, you need someone to be what we think Justin Scott's going to be. I don't care if he's a 5-star like Justin Scott or some 3-star kid that nobody knows about. I don't care. I don't care. Because number one, sometimes you misevaluate. Number two, some kids develop differently. Some kids are 5 stars in high school, but they never get a lick better. Just the way that it is. Some kids like Joe Alt are 240 pounds when you recruit them, and by the time they're sophomores in college, they're 320-pound stars, monsters, And that's my rant on that one, Sean. I think we need to stop focusing so much on what they are in high school or what some high school evaluator looks at and say, who are the college coaches pushing for these kids? Who do you believe more, Sean, about a Don Schuler? Rivals, who ranks him as a 3-star, or Marcus Freeman, Nick Saban, Kirby Smart, and Ryan Daystaff? Because all 4 of those schools offered him. The 3 schools that I just mentioned offered him after he committed to Notre Dame. During his senior year, a senior year that made rivals think they needed to drop him down to a 3-star. So who do you trust more in that scenario? Rivals or those coaches?
Which goes to, you always say, if you see Notre Dame get on an offensive lineman that has an offer from Iowa or Wisconsin.
Yep. Right.
Notre Dame is starting to be the school that other schools look to.
Yeah.
To say, oh, Notre Dame offered them?
They're doing that at corner a lot too.
Yes.
With the last 2 years, you go look at the corners that Mike Mickens offers and Freeman offers. Watch what happens to them after those kids get offered by Notre Dame. Just go watch, because that's important. Hey, Sean, here's another one. When Benjamin Morrison, one of the reasons that I felt good, like sometimes I'll evaluate a kid and rank him high, and like nobody else does, and his offer list isn't impressive, and I'm like, I gotta watch this kid's film again because I'm on an island over here. The reason I never, ever wavered from my evaluation of Benjamin Morrison is because Nick Saban's not going out to Phoenix and pushing as hard as they were for this kid if he wasn't a dude. Jimmy Lake is not doing everything he can to get this kid away from Notre Dame, negative recruiting, all this other stuff. And say what you want about Jimmy Lake as the head coach and D coordinator, that dude can evaluate and coach corners as good as anybody in college football could over the last 10 years, right? So Mike Mickens is battling those 2 dudes for Benjamin Morrison. That told me, no, Brian, you're right. Because it's like you said, one of the things I was told one of the reasons I fell in love with Zach Martin, this was real early on, is I was told by somebody that he was Iowa's number 1 offensive line prospect in the Midwest, over Chris Watt, over some other highly ranked guys. And I said, okay, let me take a look at this kid. And you're like, okay, I see it, right? But I'm not going to lie. Knowing that that's who Kirk Ferentz wanted mattered to me. Right now, those schools will have misses too, right? But again, that should help you kind of feel like, hey, I don't think this kid's that good. Or if you're not someone who evaluates film, but you're just looking at a kid who's a 3-star, low 4-star,
right?
You can't always follow offers because offers aren't always committable. And there's some, Bama may view a kid as a role player. They don't view him as the next, D Milner, right? But you got to pay attention to some of that stuff. And so when a Don Schuler gets dropped to a 3-star, but as a senior he got offered by Ohio State, Georgia, and Alabama, that should tell you something. He's not a 3-star. Now, did they think he was going to be Mika Fitzpatrick? No, they didn't. But they thought he could play there, and that should tell us something. So that's where I'm at. So, Brent, I like his breakdown, though, Sean. I do think that's about where you need to be, honestly, when you're talking about – I could say maybe you could take a 4-star away or 2 and add a couple 3-stars, because I do think there's a need to bring in some of those guys who are going to be good role players.
Developmental role players,
Yeah, who are going to be – those guys are going to embrace that role of – hey, I'll be on special teams for 4 years. That's cool with me. You need those those are the glue guys, and it's okay to get those. But yes, you need the more high intent, and that's where Notre Dame's been lacking. They haven't had enough of that. They've had the 5-stars college players, but there's too many of those role players types in the starting lineup. That's what I think. I saw this that somebody said this to me, and I'm not sure if this is correct, that I think that over the last 2 years, that over the last 2 years, I think they said that Notre Dame was like second or third when it came to like the Blue Star rating thing with college football, which is
Okay.
basically, I think what they said was Blue Star. It's just something I had not heard a whole lot about before, but apparently it's something along the lines of anybody that's a 4 or 5 star player, and Notre Dame had something like an 80-something% Blue Star rating or something like that, which like is like on the same level as like Bama and Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where they need to be. That's where they need to be. And it's because that's where you start getting the depth of talent. And I've said this a million times, Sean. Top 5, Notre Dame could go pound for pound with Alabama in 2012, top 5 players. But the big difference between 6 through 20, big difference.
Yeah.
And that's where Notre Dame needs to get to. Blue chip ratio is what it's called. Jay Henry just reminded me. I couldn't remember exactly how they called it, but yeah. So I mean that's important, man. That's important. So yeah. Anyway, good stuff. Good stuff, Brent. And then Brent's got another one, Sean. He goes, Brian and Sean, what are your thoughts regarding the Florida incoming freshman? That would be Jaden Greathouse, who left after signing a 4-year, $14 million deal. Our team's really paying this much money for talent. I think the whole reason he left is because they're not paying him for that. And if they would have paid him that, Sean, he's still at Florida.
Mm-hmm.
But they weren't willing to pay him that, and that's why he's leaving. I really thought that they could renege on that deal, and they did, but they did it so late that he'd still sign and
still sign. Yep.
And you know what? This is probably going to be unpopular in this chat, Sean. I'm glad Jaden Greathouse told him to pound sand.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think the biggest mistake, and I said this, look, bird in the hand is better than 2 in the bush. The 8 he has sitting there waiting for him at at Miami.
Right.
At some point, you got to be happy. There's always a greater deal that they say that can come around the corner. Sometimes you have to be content. I think he learns a valuable lesson. I think the people around him learn a valuable lesson. Like there was a reason you were at the University of Miami along with the NIL deal. When you just made it totally about NIL.
Right. He was going to go to the highest bidder, and he never hid that.
Yeah.
And that should be a lesson learned for kids next year. It's like, hey, look, if you want to make NIL your decision-making process, I mean, we could have a conversation about whether you should or shouldn't do that. But if you're going to do it, you're going to do it. Yeah. Be smart about it. Be smart. Make sure, number one, make sure that you're going – like I've said this about Nico. Yeah, Nico, part of what made Nico go to Tennessee was he got a big NIL deal. But he's also going to a school that has proven they can develop a player like him. And that's the thing is like, make sure you're still going somewhere that they can develop you.
Yeah.
Because $14 million over 4 years is not going to be as much as if you go somewhere that can get. Jaden Greathouse is a very raw football player with tons of talent. He's incredibly raw, physically and mentally. He's got to go somewhere that can produce, that can develop him. And so if you're just going somewhere for NIL, you may not. This is going to be it. This is the last big paycheck you're ever getting, because you're not going somewhere that's going to get you needed the work. You're not Arch Manning. You're not Kenny Minchie. You're not an advanced guy physically and mentally. You need the work. You're not Dante. And so you need the work. And so you look at Nico, he didn't get as much money as Jaden was promised, but you know what he's getting? Pretty quality quarterback development guy and program, right? And that's important. And I would hope more kids would be like, hey, look, I'll take $3 million less to go somewhere that has a much better track record of producing people in my position than I'm going to just take the money and go somewhere.
Yep.
Right. But no, to answer your question, though, teams aren't paying that much money, which is why he's leaving. And I've heard a lot of people say it's going to get worse. I don't think it's going to get worse. I think it's going to be really bad early. And then because more kids are going to be a little bit more gun shy when what happens with this.
Right.
Right. Oh, yeah, you're promising me that. Let me see that money up front. Because you're already seeing this. In year 2 of NIL, Sean, you and I know this. There were more kids saying, no. You're not paying me when I get there. I want that money now.
Yeah.
Well, no, hold on. So no. If I want this money now, because I don't want to sign a letter of intent and go through the next 8 months and not keep getting recruited and then show up and you're not going to give me that money. There's going to be more kids doing that next year. Okay, I want my money now. And then what's going to happen then? They're going to get their money now, and then they're still not going to sign. And now the collectors are like, well, we're not promising that money, and we're not going to give it to you up front. So then all of a sudden, it kind of comes back to somewhat of a normal thing for this craziness. It won't ever be truly normal till the NCAA starts regulating it to a degree. But I think you're going to see that, to be honest with you, as well. So, because somebody said in the chat, like, I'm not sure Miami would have honored it either. A lot of stories out there about how broken promises in NIL. And even the numbers that we're hearing with Miami, it would have been hard for me to see them giving that kid $9 million, because that's a lot more than what we have known about as being promised. Somebody's like, oh, some guy gave him $5 million. So what you're saying is their giant donor did not give them enough money to cover half of what they promised that kid, or about half what they promised that kid.
Well, these collectives are not the university. That's
Correct.
what people need to understand. Like, these peoples that represent these collectives, they're not the university. They're not employees of the university. And the university can really just say, look, we didn't have anything to do with that. Right? And
which is a lie.
You know, if whoever was part of the collective, if that donor said, look, I'm not really sure that I want to give money to this kid.
Which they shouldn't. It's a terrible investment. It's a terrible investment.
Then it is what it is. But once again, it falls upon, we can talk all you want, right? NIL, and, I see people put names. I see people put names of these kids talking about NIL. It's like, dude, please. If you were a 5-star, you would discuss NIL too.
You should.
It's like stop. Get off your high horse. You would discuss NIL as well. Every kid that talks NIL is not about the money.
Every kid should seek to maximize the opportunities he has now to incentivize his talent.
Absolutely.
And you'd be foolish not to. The issue that I have, and the issue I think that you have, Sean, is the manner in which it's being used as an enticement to get kids to go to school there.
Yeah. Pay for play is ridiculous.
Because what ends up happening is kids end up making bad decisions, and either A, they get screwed because they don't get the money, or B, they go somewhere because, hey, $14 million today doesn't go as far as it did when you and I were kids.
No, sir.
First of all, half of it's going to the feds, right, and the state governments. And then the rest, what cut is going to your agent? What are you promising to buy for your mom and dad? Next thing you know, I got like $500,000 left, and I'm at a crap school with a guy that doesn't know how to develop me as a player, right? So CJ Stroud getting a Lamborghini, good. Like, there were some people that were pissed. I got a buddy of mine, Sean. Tell me, everything good?
Man, I just got a text message from somebody that is scary.
Okay.
I don't, you figure out like, how in the world does somebody get my number?
Right.
Like, I need to go check my social media.
Yeah.
And see if my number is out there. Cause
we'll have to
pretty
discuss
much.
that. Have to discuss that afterwards.
Yeah.
Here, you need to go? You good?
No,
okay.
I'm good.
Like, I had a buddy of mine said to me, when they heard that CJ Stroud was offered like a bunch of money to stay at Ohio State, he goes, this is going to kill the game. I said, no, this is great for college football. Yeah. That's what NIL is supposed to be about. This kid is worth X amount of dollars for what he has proven at the Ohio State University, and what he could bring to your football program next year as a starting quarterback because of what he has accomplished.
Right.
And so if they want to sign him to some deal to be your spokesman or do whatever else, then he has earned that. And I'm good with that. Right. And so that's what NIL is supposed to be about. It's essentially for what you have proven and what your value is and for what you've accomplished in college. And I don't want it to be an enticement to transfer. I don't like it as an enticement to come in as a high school kid. I want it to be about I want it because there's no NIL deal that someone should give you that should be dependent upon where you go to school. If a company thinks that you're worth $1 million, then I should be worth $1 million wherever I go. That's how I view it, right? And if a school's only saying, well, no, come here, well, then you don't really value me. You just want me to come to, you're trying to use an enticement. But the point is like, when these kids are getting paid for what they do in college, I'm all for it. I'm all for it. Because most teammates will respect that. Most teammates will be like, look and be like, CJ, yeah, of course CJ's getting that. He's that dude. Right? Of
Yeah.
course he's getting that, right? He's our quarterback. He's this, he's that, he's the other thing, but he's earned it.
Yeah.
But some freshman walks in the door with a $13 million contract and he can't complete a hitch route. Get out of here with that. Now all of a sudden that kid becomes a pariah, and now how's he going to win over that locker room?
Yeah.
And so NIL, I think, is potentially a great thing, and every kid should have. If you as a student athlete have not had a conversation with whatever school you're going to go to, Harvard to Notre Dame to Florida to Georgia, if you have not had conversations about NIL, you are not doing recruiting right.
Yeah.
But it should not be the driving force the only driving force or the primary driving force in a decision. It should rank in the top 10 for everybody and needs to be in the top 5 for a lot of kids, but it shouldn't be in your top 2 unless you're in a situation where your family, like I said to Sean, like let's just say hypothetically your mother got sick and your family had to rack up $80,000 in medical bills and your insurance is going to pay $10,000 of it.
Yeah.
Right. You know what? I'm okay with that. Or your mom's house is your dad's house, whatever the case may be, and your family's about to lose their home. Okay, you know what? I'm kind of okay with it. I understand that kid saying I'm going somewhere. They're going to offer me X amount of dollars. I'm okay with that. Every kid's circumstance is different, but by and large, I just don't want it to be an enticement thing. Do it for what you have earned at that school. So that's my stance on that. So that's a great place to end this one, Sean. I think that's I think it was a good conversation to end it. Yeah, shoot.
Maybe I missed something. Did someone ask a question about Justin Scott that you went crazy on today?
Where?
Because I thought I was here for the entire show, so I was wrong. Yeah, I'm just asking because
No.
See, this is my thing. I don't play games, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're gonna text me and ask me something about what's going on in the show, first of all, I don't know how you got my number because it's not a saved number in my phone, and it's from a 312 area code. Maybe my number is out there, maybe on my Facebook or something. I don't know. Secondly, I don't do this anonymous thing. So if you're going to have the courage to say some of the stuff you said in this text, then put your name to it. Lastly, I'm me. Brian Driscoll is him. I don't have to protect him. I don't have to do anything for him. He stands on his word.
You got a problem with something I said, you come to me about it.
I stand on my word.
Right.
You nigga can't come to me to get him in order. That's not how that works. And I don't allow people to do that. I don't allow people to do that on Lucky Lefty.
Uh-huh.
I'm definitely not about to allow an Irish breakdown. Like, if I want to say something about what he has said that I disagree with, I'll do that. If I choose not to say anything, see, this is what you do. This is maybe you all don't have family, or maybe you don't treat your family or your friends this way. See, if I have a disagreement on certain topics, I don't have to get into it in front of you all. That's something I'll do behind doors and say what I have to say because I'm not here for your entertainment. And I wouldn't do that to anybody. If we have an issue, we'll deal with it. And the only reason I'm talking about this now is I gave you an opportunity to say who you were, and you decided to stay anonymous. So, all of this stuff you text me, like the whole humiliation thing, I missed that. I've been here. I know I stepped away for like 5 minutes.
We didn't talk about Justin Scott while you were away.
Yeah, so I'm sorry that's your perception, but you can't speak for me. And the fact that you invoked my father in these texts and you don't know who he is, we have a real serious problem. Real serious problem. I don't play those games. And obviously you've been watching the show. So like I said, since you want to stay anonymous via the text, I'll address it right here. I don't play those games. Don't do that. Everybody knows me. I respond to tweets, direct messages, everything, regardless of whether or not you agree or disagree with me. But this right here, you overstepped your bounds. You just overstepped your bounds. And the fact that you didn't want to say who you were, nah, I can't do that. That and bringing my father up, nah, that's not cool.
Well, that person definitely doesn't have the stones to say who they are now, Sean. And that's the BS thing about it. You're man enough to say something, then be man enough to put your name on it. You know what I mean? So
I don't know. You know, I missed it. Like I said, maybe I missed it. I walked away. Maybe that was a question in the chat. I mixed, but based upon what they said, I was obviously on the show. You know, they basically said I was a coward because they saw that I didn't agree with what was said, but I just didn't want to say anything. So
yes, because you have a long history of not being willing to disagree with me, right, Sean?
So a lot of things that you didn't want to own up to by name. So since you didn't want to own up to it by name, and you had the audacity to text me to like use my personal information, number one, as if you had permission to text me, because I just wouldn't see your number and then just text you. I wouldn't do that to anyone if I don't have permission to say it's cool to text you. But like I said, you overstepped your boundaries in several ways. That's my opinion. So,
there you go.
But everybody knows if you want to get at me, tweet me, inbox me, direct. Hey, let's kick it.
Or if you got a problem with me, my DMs are open too. Don't be a coward. Don't go run into him. Come to me. Be a grown up. Is that too much to ask, Sean?
Man, you saw my face. You picked up on it.
Yeah, I was like, "What's going on, man?" I like texted you, like, "You good?" Like, what's going on over here?
I couldn't believe what I was reading. I'm like, wait a minute. Like what? And this had to happen during the day's show because obviously it referenced the 247 article on Justin Scott. And I guess they felt like you humiliated people. And I'm like, okay.
Some sensitive people around here, man.
Oh, man.
Some sensitive people in here. So, yeah. All right. Well, that is where we're going to end today's show. So before we get out here, everybody, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast. If you have not done so, subscribe to the the CFB Nation podcast. You can find it on Apple, Spotify, Google, and all your podcast places. That is where you can find the podcast form of the Lucky Lefty podcast, the State of Recruiting with John Garcia, and our CFB All-America squad. If you have not done so, make sure you subscribe to Lucky Lefty on YouTube and our CFB Nation channel on YouTube as well. And as always, sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Y'all have a great rest of your weekend, and we will talk to you again very soon on the Irish Breakdown podcast.